My daughter-in-law turned my only son against me until they cut me off completely for 10 long years. They didn't want a bricklayer at their fancy wedding. Then my small backyard barbecue sauce business exploded into a multi-million-dollar empire, and I bought the biggest mansion in Atlanta. The very next day, they showed up on my doorstep with a U-Haul truck and said, "Hey, Dad, we are moving in since you have all this extra room." They thought they were moving into a gold mine, but they had no idea they were walking straight into a trap I had spent a decade building. What I did next shocked them to their core. Before I tell you how I taught them a lesson they will never forget, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to ungrateful family members who only come around when they smell money. My name is Augustus Miller, but everyone calls me Gus. I am 73 years old, and I have spent 50 of those years with cement dust in my lungs and calluses on my hands thick enough to sand wood. I know the value of $1 because I had to sweat for every single one of them. Sitting on the wraparound porch of my new 6,000 square foot colonial-style estate in an upscale neighborhood of Atlanta feels like wearing a suit that does not quite fit yet. The ice in my sweet tea was melting in the humid Georgia afternoon heat, and for a moment I felt peace. That peace lasted exactly 3 minutes. The roar of a dying engine shattered the silence. A rusted, beat-up U-Haul truck turned off the main road and chugged up my pristine paved driveway, leaving a cloud of black exhaust smoke that hung in the air like a bad omen. I did not move from my rocking chair. I just watched. My grip tightened on my glass so hard I thought it might shatter. I knew that truck. I did not know the license plate, but I knew the energy coming from it. It was the energy of trouble. The truck screeched to a halt right in front of my custom iron gates. The driver door opened and out stepped Dante, my son. The boy I had not seen in the flesh since he was 28 years old. He is 38 now, but he looked older. His shoulders were slumped and he wore a polo shirt that was too tight around the middle. He looked like a man who had been defeated by life but was trying to hide it. Then the passenger door opened and the temperature on my porch seemed to drop 10 degrees. Tiffany. She stepped out onto my driveway like she was stepping onto a red carpet she had paid for. High heels on asphalt, designer sunglasses covering half her face. She looked at my house not with admiration, but with the hungry calculation of a wolf looking at a wounded deer. She did not look at me. She started barking orders at the two movers who looked like they had been hired from a street corner 5 minutes ago. "Careful with that sofa," she screamed, pointing a manicured finger. "That is Italian leather and it costs more than your truck." I set my tea down. The sound of the glass hitting the wicker table was the only noise I made. I stood up. My knees popped a little, but I stood tall. 6 feet 2 inches of bricklayer muscle does not go away just because you get old. I walked down the steps of the porch slowly. Dante saw me first. He flinched. Actually flinched. "Hi, Dad," he said. His voice cracked. It was pathetic. "We are home. Home." The word tasted like vinegar in my mouth. I looked at him. I looked at the U-Haul. I looked at the mountain of boxes they were already starting to unload onto my driveway without asking for permission. "I do not recall inviting any guests," I said. My voice was low and rough like gravel in a mixer. Tiffany finally took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were blue and cold, and she forced a smile that looked like it hurt her face. "Oh, Gus, do not be dramatic," she said, waving her hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. "We tried calling, but your number must have changed. Besides, family does not need invitations." 10 years. That is how long it had been. I let the silence hang there heavy and suffocating. I wanted them to feel it. I wanted them to remember the last text message I received from that woman. It was a week before their wedding. I still have it saved on my old flip phone. It said, "Do not come to the ceremony, Gus. Your appearance is too blue-collar. We are trying to impress Dante's partners. We will send you photos." They never sent the photos. But they sent a text when my grandson Leo was born. It was a picture of a baby and a link to a PayPal account. I sent $5,000. They took the money and blocked my number again. And now here they were, standing on my property, acting like they owned the place. Dante stepped forward trying to play the peacemaker role he had never been good at. "Dad, look, it is a long story. The landlord at our condo was a crook. He kicked us out over a misunderstanding. We are suing him, of course, but we needed a place to land just for a bit, and since we heard through the grapevine that your little sauce business took off and you bought this place, we figured it was perfect timing. Little sauce business. Miller's Gold BBQ sauce was currently on the shelves of 3,000 supermarkets across the Southeast. I had just signed a distribution deal with a national chain, but to them I was still just Gus, the bricklayer who got lucky mixing vinegar and spices in his kitchen. I did not move out of the way. I stood right in the center of the walkway, blocking the path to the front door. A misunderstanding, I repeated. Like the misunderstanding when you forgot to invite me to your wedding. Or the misunderstanding when you forgot I existed for a decade until you needed a roof over your heads. Tiffany let out an exaggerated sigh. She walked past Dante and stood toe-to-toe with me. She smelled of expensive perfume and entitlement. Look, Gus, we are here now. Do you want to make a scene in front of the neighbors? We are tired. We are stressed, and we have your grandson in the car. That was the punch. She knew exactly where to hit. Leo. The back door of the truck opened and a small boy climbed out. He was about 8 years old. He had messy hair and he was clutching a tablet like a lifeline. He looked up and saw me. He had my wife's eyes. He had Bessie's eyes, brown and deep and full of a kindness that this world tries to beat out of you. Seeing him was like seeing a ghost. My heart, which had been a stone inside my chest for the last 10 minutes, cracked just a little. "Mommy," he said quietly. "Is this the hotel?" "No, sweetie," Tiffany said loud enough for me to hear. "This is Grandpa Gus's house. We are going to live here for a while." She did not ask. She stated it. She looked at me, daring me to kick a child out onto the street. She knew I was a man of code. She knew I would never let a child of my blood sleep in a truck, no matter how much I despised his parents. I looked at Dante. He looked down at his shoes, unable to meet my gaze. He was using his own son as a human shield. "Fine," I said. The word felt heavy. "But we are going to have rules." Tiffany clapped her hands together like she had just won a prize at a carnival. "Wonderful. Movers, bring the boxes inside, chop chop." She pushed past me. She physically brushed against my shoulder and walked up the steps of my porch like she had built it herself. She did not wipe her feet on the mat. She marched right through the custom mahogany double doors that I had imported from Brazil. I turned and watched the invasion. Dante muttered a quick "thanks, Dad," and hurried after her, dragging a suitcase. I was left standing on the driveway with the movers, who looked at me with pity. They knew. Any man with eyes could see what was happening. I was being hijacked. I followed them inside. The foyer of my house is grand. It has a 20-foot ceiling and a crystal chandelier that Bessie would have loved. She always wanted a house with a chandelier. I bought this place for her memory as much as for myself. Tiffany was already in the middle of the living room, spinning around with her arms out. "Well, it is certainly big," she said critically. "A bit dated, though. We will need to do something about this wallpaper. It is very depressing. And these floors need refinishing. They are too dark." She was criticizing my house. The house I bought with my hard-earned money. The house she had been inside for exactly 30 seconds. I walked over to the mantel where I kept the urn. A simple ceramic urn with Bessie's ashes. Beside it was a framed photo of us from 40 years ago, covered in dust from a construction site, but smiling like we owned the world. "Do not touch anything," I said. My voice was calm but dangerous. Tiffany ignored me. She was already heading for the stairs. Her heels clicked loudly on the hardwood, echoing through the empty spaces of the house. "Come on, Dante, bring the bags up," she yelled from the landing. I walked to the bottom of the stairs. "Where do you think you are going?" I asked. She stopped and looked down at me from the top of the staircase. She looked like a queen addressing a peasant. "Well, we need to get settled," she said. "We will take the master suite facing south, the one with the balcony. I checked the floor plan online before we came. It has the best light for my morning yoga." My blood boiled. That was my room. That was the room where I spoke to Bessie every night before I went to sleep. "You can take the guest room down the hall," I said. Tiffany laughed. A cold, sharp sound. "Don't be silly, Gus. You are an old man. You shouldn't be climbing these stairs every day. It is bad for your joints. You take the guest room on the first floor behind the kitchen. It is smaller and easier for you to keep clean. The master suite is for the heads of the household. Heads of the household." She said it without a stutter. She truly believed it. She believed that by simply walking through the door, she had become the owner, and I had become the tenant. I looked at Dante, waiting for him to correct her, waiting for him to say, "No, Tiffany, that is Dad's room." Dante just hauled a heavy suitcase up the first few steps, puffing for breath. "Yeah, Dad, she is right," he grunted. "It makes more sense. Plus, we need the space for our things. You don't have that much stuff anyway." I stood there at the bottom of the stairs, gripping the banister. I could have thrown them out right then. I could have called the police. I could have physically dragged them out the door. But then I looked at Leo sitting on one of the boxes in the foyer, looking scared and confused. I took a deep breath. I let the anger settle deep in my stomach where it would fuel me. They wanted to play a game. They wanted to take over. They thought I was just a senile old bricklayer they could bully. They had no idea who they were dealing with. "Enjoy the room," I said quietly. Tiffany smirked. "I knew you would see reason." She turned and marched down the hall towards my bedroom. I watched them go. I reached into my pocket and felt the cold metal of my phone. I was not going to call the police. Not yet. I had a better idea. I walked into my study and closed the door. I pulled out a fresh legal pad and a pen. If they wanted to stay, they were going to stay on my terms. And the rent was going to be much higher than they could ever afford. I sat down and began to write. The title of the document was simple: Tenancy Agreement. But it was not a normal agreement. It was the first shovel of dirt in the grave they were digging for themselves. I walked back out of my study with the yellow legal pad in one hand and a cheap ballpoint pen in the other. In the 10 minutes I had been gone, the atmosphere in my foyer had shifted from an invasion to an occupation. Tiffany was already instructing the movers to be careful with a velvet armchair that looked like it had been clawed by a cat in a previous life. Dante was standing by the open door, fanning himself with a piece of junk mail he had picked up from the hallway table. When they saw me return, they stopped. They probably expected me to come back with a checkbook or maybe a set of spare keys. They did not expect a legal pad and a face made of stone. "Stop right there," I said. My voice bounced off the high ceilings. The movers froze. One of them was holding a lamp. He looked at me, then looked at Tiffany. He was smart enough to know who actually owned the bricks he was standing on. "Put the lamp down," I told him. "Outside." Tiffany spun around. Her face went from commanding to furious in a split second. "Excuse me, we are moving in, Gus. We discussed this." "We did not discuss anything," I corrected her. "You announced." I listened. "There is a difference." I walked to the center of the room and stood between them and the rest of the house. I planted my feet. This was my line in the sand. "You are not moving furniture into my house," I said, calm and low. "You are not painting walls. You are not taking the master suite. In fact, I have not even decided if you are staying the night." Tiffany let out a screech that sounded like a tire blowing out on the highway. "Are you insane?" "We have nowhere to go. Our landlord in Chicago scammed us, Gus. He took our rent money for 6 months and then foreclosed on the building without telling us. We came home to an eviction notice and a padlock on the door 3 days ago. We drove straight here. We are exhausted. We are broke. And you want to kick us out onto the street." She played the victim card with the skill of a Las Vegas dealer. But I have been in business long enough to know when someone is selling me a bridge. "That sounds like a terrible situation," I said. "But it sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. You have not spoken to me in a decade. You cannot just show up and expect me to fix your life." Dante finally stepped away from the door. He looked sweaty and desperate. The Dante I raised was a proud boy. He played varsity football. He stood tall. This man in front of me was a shadow. He was hunched over, defeated by his own choices and by the woman standing next to him. "Dad, please," he said. His voice was thin. "We don't have money for a hotel. The accounts are frozen because of the lawsuit with the landlord. We just need a few weeks, maybe a month, just until I get my settlement check." A settlement check. There is always a check coming with people like Dante. It is always next week or next month. It never comes. I looked him in the eye. "You are 38 years old, Dante. If you don't have emergency savings, that is on you." Tiffany stepped in front of Dante, shielding him from my gaze. "Oh, stop lecturing him. You are his father. It is your job to help. Or are you really that heartless? Are you going to let your own flesh and blood sleep in a U-Haul truck?" She grabbed Leo's hand and yanked the poor boy forward. He stumbled and dropped his tablet. "Look at him," Tiffany yelled. "Look at your grandson, Gus. Do you want him sleeping in a parking lot tonight? Is that the legacy you want to leave?" I looked down. Leo was trembling. He was not crying yet, but his lip was quivering. He looked up at me, and for a second the air left my lungs. It was the eyes. He had Bessie's eyes. My late wife had eyes that could see right through you, eyes that could spot a lie a mile away but could also forgive a sinner with a single blink. Leo had those same deep brown, soulful eyes. He looked terrified. He looked at me, not as a grandfather, but as a giant who held his fate in his hands. He looked exactly like Bessie did the day the doctor told us the cancer was back. That look of helpless fear mixed with quiet dignity. My heart hammered against my ribs. I hated Dante for doing this. I hated him for using this innocent boy as a human shield. It was a coward's move. A man fights his own battles. He does not hide behind a child. But I could not do it. I could not send that boy away. Not yet. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of expensive perfume and desperate sweat. Fine, I said. Tiffany let out a breath of triumph and started to turn away. Okay, movers, bring the... I held up my hand. A large, callous palm that stopped her cold. I said fine to the boy staying, I said. And since he cannot stay alone, you two can stay too. But... I slapped the legal pad. You sign this, right now. Tiffany stared at the yellow paper like it was contaminated. What is that? It is a guest agreement, I said. I wrote it just now. It states very clearly that you are guests, short-term guests. You are not tenants, you are not residents, you have no lease. You pay zero rent, which means you have zero rights to the property. You are here at my pleasure, and my pleasure can end at any second. If I tell you to leave, you leave immediately. No 30-day notice, no eviction process. You get out. Dante looked at the paper, then at me. Dad, are you serious? You want us to sign a contract? We are family. Family treats each other with respect, I said, keeping my voice hard. Strangers who show up after 10 years demanding rooms get contracts. Sign it or get back in the truck. I held the pen out to Dante. Tiffany grabbed his arm. Her nails dug into his skin. Don't sign that, Dante. It is insulting. He is trying to trap us. Then leave, I said. I pointed to the door. The Ritz-Carlton is downtown. I hear the sheets are very soft. Dante looked at Tiffany. He looked at the boxes. He looked at his empty wallet. He knew he had no choice. He pulled his arm away from her. We have to Tiff, he whispered. We have nowhere else. He took the pen. His hand was shaking as he scribbled his name on the line I had drawn. Dante Miller. Now you, I said, pointing the pen at Tiffany. She glared at me with pure venom. If looks could burn, my house would be a pile of ash. She snatched the pen from Dante. She signed her name so hard the tip of the pen almost tore through the paper. There she spat. Are you happy now, you old miser? I took the pad back. I blew on the ink to dry it. I tore off the top sheet and folded it carefully, putting it into my breast pocket right next to my heart. You can put your bags in the downstairs guest room, I said. The movers can put the boxes in the garage. Nothing comes into the main house except clothes. I don't want your clutter in my living space. Tiffany let out a short, sharp laugh. Whatever, Gus. Come on, Dante. Let's get Leo settled. She grabbed Dante's arm again and pulled him toward the hallway. As they passed me, she leaned in close to him. She thought I couldn't hear. She thought my old ears were gone. Or maybe she just didn't care. Just sign it, she whispered, her voice dripping with malice. That piece of paper is trash anyway. It won't hold up in court. Once we are in, we are in. Possession is 9/10 of the law. We will handle the old man later. She walked away, her heels clicking a victory rhythm on my hardwood floors. I stood there in the foyer alone. I touched the paper in my pocket. She was right about one thing. Possession is powerful. But she was wrong about the paper. She thought she was dealing with a lonely old man who just wanted company. She didn't realize she was dealing with a man who reads 3 newspapers a day and has a lawyer on speed dial. I watched them disappear down the hall. I looked at the mud on the floor from their shoes. Welcome home, I whispered to the empty room. I turned and walked back to my study. I had one more document to draft. The agreement they just signed was the bait. Now I had to build the cage. I sat down at my heavy oak desk. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Hello, Saul, I said when the voice answered. Gus, Saul asked. Everything okay? You sound like you just swallowed a bee. I looked at the closed door of the study. No, Saul. I have rats in the house. Big ones. I need you to prepare the papers we talked about last year. The irrevocable trust documents. And Saul. Yeah, Gus. Make sure the clause about criminal behavior is in bold print. I hung up. Outside, I could hear Tiffany shouting at Dante about which suitcase had her yoga mat. They were loud, they were messy, they were already spreading out like a virus. But viruses can be cured if you catch them early enough. And I had just started the treatment. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a small black box. Inside was a set of micro cameras I had bought for security at the warehouse, but never used. I looked at them, then I looked at the hallway. If they wanted to play reality TV in my house, I was going to make sure I directed the show. I stood up and put the cameras in my pocket. It was time to welcome my guests properly. The first morning of the occupation began not with the sound of birds singing in the Georgia pines, but with the sound of a drill. I woke up at 5 in the morning like I have every day since I was 16 years old. A man who builds things for a living learns that the day waits for no one. But today the silence of my sanctuary was broken. I walked out of my bedroom downstairs, and the first thing I smelled was not coffee. It was the chemical sting of paint thinner. I walked into the living room and stopped dead in my tracks. My hallway, which I had lined with black and white photographs of my ancestors, was being dismantled. These were not just pictures. They were evidence. There was a photo of my great-grandfather Elias, standing in front of a sharecropper shack in 1910, his hands the size of shovels. There was a picture of my grandmother washing clothes in a tin tub to send 3 children to school. That hallway was my church. It was where I went to remember whose shoulders I was standing on. And there was Tiffany standing in her silk pajamas, holding a cup of coffee, pointing a manicured finger at the wall. 2 men in white overalls were taking the frames down and stacking them on the floor like firewood. "What is happening here?" I asked. My voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. Tiffany spun around. She did not look guilty. She looked annoyed that I was awake. "Oh, good you are up," she said. "We are just brightening the place up, Gus. These pictures are frankly depressing. I mean, look at them. So much poverty and struggle. It is bad energy for Leo. We want him to have an abundance mindset, not a scarcity mindset." She gestured to the painters. "I hired these guys to do a quick coat of creamy vanilla. It will make the space feel more open and modern. You will thank me later." She was erasing my history to make room for a shade of beige. She called my family's survival bad energy. My blood did not boil, it froze. That is what happens when true anger hits a man like me. It gets cold. I looked at the painters. One of them was an older man holding a roller. He looked at me, and he saw the look in my eyes. He lowered the roller. "Put the pictures back," I said to the men. Tiffany scoffed. "Don't listen to him. I am paying you double to get this done before lunch." I stepped forward. I did not look at Tiffany. I looked at the foreman. "This is my house," I said. "You are touching my property without my permission. If you put 1 drop of paint on that wall, I will have you arrested for vandalism before the paint dries. Pack up your gear and get out." The foreman did not hesitate. He knew a homeowner when he saw one, and he knew a squatter when he heard one. He nodded at his partner, and they started packing the drop cloths. Tiffany shrieked. She actually stomped her foot like a toddler. "You are being impossible, Gus. This environment is toxic. It is gloomy and old, just like you. I am trying to make this a home for your grandson, and you are clinging to these creepy old photos of dead people. Those dead people paid for the floor you are standing on," I said. I walked past her and started picking up the frames myself, wiping the dust off the glass with my sleeve. I hung my great-grandfather back on his hook. I made sure he was straight. "If you don't like the decor, you can look at the inside of your U-Haul truck," I said. Tiffany stormed off, muttering about emotional abuse and hostile living conditions. I finished hanging the pictures. My hands were shaking slightly, not from age, but from the effort of not throwing her out the window. I needed coffee. I walked into the kitchen hoping for a moment of peace. Instead, I found Dante. He was sprawling on my Italian leather sofa in the adjacent den, the TV blasting a sports channel at maximum volume. He was wearing boxer shorts and a t-shirt that was stained with something yellow. On the table in front of him was a bottle. My bottle. It was a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle 23-year-old bourbon, a gift from a supplier when my sauce went national. It was worth $3,000. I was saving it for Leo's college graduation, or maybe my own funeral. The bottle was half empty. Dante was drinking it out of a coffee mug like it was cheap beer. "Morning, Dad," he grunted, not looking away from the screen. "Hey, do we have any bacon? Tiffany only buys that turkey stuff and it tastes like cardboard." I looked at the bottle. Then I looked at my son. The last time I saw him this comfortable, he was 28 years old and sitting in my old kitchen in the modest ranch house I used to own on the south side. He had been crying then. He had gambled away $40,000 on online poker. He owed money to people who broke kneecaps for a living. I remembered the fear in his eyes. "Dad, they are going to kill me," he had said. I did what a father does. I pawned the deed to that house, my paid-off house, the house where Bessie and I raised him. I took out a high-interest loan to pay off his sharks. I worked double shifts for 5 years to pay it back, but I couldn't keep up. I lost that house. That was why I was living in a rental when my sauce business finally took off. And what did Dante do? He told Tiffany that I lost the house because of bad investments. He told her I was irresponsible with money. He told her I squandered his inheritance. He let his wife believe I was a failure so he didn't have to admit he was a degenerate gambler. And now here he was drinking my $3,000 bourbon in the house I built from the ashes of the one he burned down, asking me for bacon. "That is expensive whiskey, Dante," I said. He shrugged, taking another gulp. "It is okay. A little woody for my taste, but it does the job. By the way, can you give me the Wi-Fi password? The signal in the guest room is weak." I walked over and took the bottle from the table. I capped it. "The Wi-Fi is for residents," I said. Dante rolled his eyes. "Come on, Dad. Don't be petty. We are family." Family. That word was starting to sound like a curse. I walked out of the room carrying the bottle. I needed to put it somewhere safe, somewhere they wouldn't look. I headed towards my home office at the back of the house. It was the one room I had explicitly told them was off limits. It had a heavy oak door and a deadbolt. But as I approached the hallway, I saw it. The door was ajar. Just a crack. I stopped. I had locked that door last night. I am sure of it. I keep the key on the chain around my neck. I moved silently. The thick carpet absorbed my footsteps. I pushed the door open slowly. Tiffany was there. She was standing behind my desk. The desk was a mess. Drawers were pulled open. Papers were scattered everywhere. She was holding a thick blue folder in her hands. My breath hitched. That was not just any folder. That was the master ledger for Miller's Gold LLC. It contained the quarterly earnings reports, the distribution contracts, and the bank statements showing the liquid assets of the company. She was flipping through the pages. Her eyes were wide, not with shock, but with greed. She was licking her lips. She looked like a pirate who had just opened a chest and found it full of diamonds. I watched her run her finger down a column of numbers. 6 million, she whispered to herself. Her voice trembled with excitement. He has 6 million in liquid cash. She wasn't just looking for a place to stay. She was looking for a payday. She turned the page and pulled out her phone, ready to take a picture of the bank account number. I stepped into the room. "Find what you were looking for?" I asked. She jumped so high she dropped the folder. Papers spilled across the floor like autumn leaves. She spun around, clutching her chest. Her face went pale, then flushed red. "Gus, you scared me." I did not raise my voice. I did not yell. I just walked around the desk and stood over the scattered papers. "Get out," I said. Tiffany composed herself quickly. She smoothed her silk pajamas and put on that mask of arrogance she wore so well. "I was just looking for a pen," she lied. Her eyes darted to the ledger on the floor. "I didn't know you were running such a complicated operation, Gus. You know, Dante has a degree in business. He could really help you optimize these tax liabilities. I saw some inefficiencies in your overhead just from a quick glance." She was caught red-handed and she was trying to give me business advice. The audacity was breathtaking. I picked up the folder. I closed it. "I will not ask you again, Tiffany. Get out of my office." She narrowed her eyes. She didn't move towards the door. She moved closer to me. "You know, Gus," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "a man your age shouldn't be handling this much stress. $6 million is a lot of responsibility. Courts often look at things like this. If something were to happen to you, if your mind were to slip, someone would need to step in. For your own good." There it was, the threat. It was veiled, but it was there. She wasn't just going to wait for me to die. She was thinking about speeding up the process legally. I looked her dead in the eye. "My mind is just fine, Tiffany. Worry about your own." She smiled a cold reptile smile. "For now, Gus. For now." She turned and walked out of the office, leaving the scent of her perfume hanging in the air like poison gas. I watched her go. Then I looked down at the ledger in my hand. I realized then that the lock on the door wasn't enough. The guest agreement wasn't enough. They weren't just guests. They were scavengers, and they had just smelled blood. I sat down in my leather chair. My hand went to the bottom drawer where I kept the old recorder I used for dictating recipes. I pressed the record button. Day 1, I said into the microphone. The subjects have breached the perimeter. They are aware of the assets. Hostility is imminent. I stopped the recording. Then I picked up my phone. I didn't call the police. I called Saul, my lawyer. Saul, I said when he answered, don't go to lunch. We need to move the timeline up. They found the numbers. I looked at the open drawer. And Saul, bring the paperwork for the cameras. I need eyes in every room, especially the kitchen. I have a feeling something bad is going to end up in my food. The smell of roasted rosemary chicken and garlic mashed potatoes wafted up the stairs and slipped under the door of my study. It was a domestic smell, a warm, homey scent that usually signals family and comfort. But to me it smelled like a trap. In the 30 years I had known my son, he had never cooked a meal that did not come out of a cardboard box. And in the 10 years since he married Tiffany, I had never known her to lift a finger in a kitchen unless it was to point at a waiter. I sat in my leather chair staring at the closed door. My stomach growled, betraying me, but my mind remained on high alert. The sudden shift in atmosphere was too sharp, too calculated. Yesterday I was a senile old nuisance who needed to be managed. Today I was being courted. I knew why. The ledger. Tiffany had seen the numbers. She had seen the millions in liquid assets and the distribution contracts that turned my backyard barbecue sauce into a national brand. She had realized that the old bricklayer she despised was sitting on a gold mine, and like any good miner, she had arrived with a pickaxe hidden behind her back. A soft knock came at the door. Gus Tiffany's voice was singing. It was a high-pitched, sugary tone that made my teeth ache. Dinner is ready. We made your favorite. I stood up and buttoned my flannel shirt. I checked the hidden camera feed on my phone one last time. The camera in the dining room showed the table set with my best china. Wine glasses were polished. Napkins were folded into swans. It looked like a setup for a real estate closing, not a family dinner. I walked downstairs. When I entered the dining room, the performance began. Tiffany was wearing a dress. Not pajamas, not yoga pants, but a cocktail dress. She rushed over to pull out my chair. Here you go, Dad, she said, beaming. Sit at the head of the table, the king of the castle. Dad. She had never called me Dad. It was always Gus, or usually, hey, you. Dante was already seated, pouring wine from a bottle that I recognized. It was a vintage Cabernet from my cellar. He didn't ask, but tonight I decided to let it slide. I wanted to see where this play was going. Thanks, I muttered, sitting down. Leo was there too, looking small and confused amidst all the forced gaiety. He looked at the mountain of food, then at his mother. Can I eat now? He whispered. Of course, sweetie Tiffany said, patting his head a little too hard. But let's wait for Grandpa Gus to take the first bite. It is respectful. I picked up my fork. The chicken was actually good. Store-bought rotisserie dressed up with herbs, I suspected, but I ate it. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sound being the clinking of silver against porcelain. So Dad Dante started clearing his throat. This house, it is really something. I mean, I knew you were doing okay, but I didn't know you were doing this okay. I kept chewing. I am comfortable, I said. Comfortable, Tiffany laughed. A high, nervous sound. Gus, you are being modest. I heard on the news about the expansion of Miller's Gold. They say you are moving into the Midwest market next quarter. That is a huge undertaking. I put my fork down. I looked at her. Her eyes were shining, not with affection, but with the reflection of the chandelier she thought she would soon own. It is a lot of work, I said simply. Exactly, Dante jumped in. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. That is what we were talking about. You are 73, Dad. You have worked hard your whole life. You shouldn't be stressing over supply chains and logistics and contract negotiations. You should be enjoying your retirement. You should be playing golf or fishing with Leo. I looked at Leo. He was busy making a volcano out of his mashed potatoes. I don't golf, I said, and I enjoy my work. But for how long? Tiffany interjected, pouring more wine into my glass. Burnout is real, Gus, and frankly, running a multi-million-dollar corporation requires a certain modern skill set. She paused for effect. You know, Dante has his MBA, she said. He graduated with honors. He understands corporate structure. He understands scaling. He has been looking for the right opportunity to really use his talents. I almost choked on my wine. Dante's talents. I remembered his talents well. His talent for poker, his talent for buying sports cars he couldn't afford, his talent for getting fired from 3 different mid-level management jobs because he felt waking up before noon was oppressive. I see, I said, wiping my mouth. So you are suggesting what exactly? Dante sat up straighter, adjusting his collar. He looked like a child playing dress-up in his father's suit. I am saying I could step in, Dad, as CEO, or at least COO. You could stay on as, founder. You could be the face on the bottle. But let me handle the heavy lifting. Let me manage the finances. Let me deal with the lawyers and the accountants. I could really optimize the tax situation. I could probably increase your net profit by 15% in the first year just by cutting some of the dead weight. Dead weight. He was talking about my employees. He was talking about Mrs. Higgins, who had run my office for 20 years. He was talking about the guys in the warehouse who I treated like sons. He wanted to come in with his fancy degree and fire the people who helped me build this empire so he could squeeze out a few more dollars for himself. I took a sip of water. I let the silence stretch out until it became uncomfortable. Dante started fidgeting with his napkin. Miller's Gold is doing just fine, I said, my voice steady and cold. My team is solid. We grew 20% last year without an MBA in the building. Tiffany's smile faltered. The corners of her mouth twitched. But Gus, she said, her voice losing some of its sugar, those people, they are employees. They are mercenaries. They don't care about you. They only care about their paycheck. If the ship starts sinking, they will be the first ones off. She reached across the table and tried to touch my hand. I pulled it back. Family is different, she said. Family protects the legacy. Dante is your blood. He is the only one who will truly look out for your best interests. You need someone on the inside who you can trust implicitly. You don't need outsiders knowing your business. I looked at her hand resting on the tablecloth. Her nails were painted a blood red. I don't have outsiders working for me, I said. I have people who stood by me when I was mixing sauce in a bathtub. I have people who worked without pay for 2 months when the first factory burned down. They are not outsiders. I looked directly at Dante. And I don't need strangers running my company. The air left the room. Dante's face went red. The vein in his forehead, which always popped out when he was losing control, started to throb. Strangers, he spat the word out. Did you just call me a stranger? I am your son. You have been a stranger for 10 years, I said calmly. You don't know my business. You don't know my product. You don't even know the names of the people you just called dead weight. You think because you have a piece of paper from a university and my last name, you can walk in and take the keys to the kingdom. I picked up my knife and cut another piece of chicken. No, I said. The answer is no. You are not coming near the company. Dante slammed his fist on the table. The silverware jumped. Leo dropped his fork and looked at his father with wide, terrified eyes. This is ridiculous, Dante shouted. He stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. You are being stubborn and selfish. You are going to run this company into the ground because you are too proud to ask for help. I am not asking for help because I don't need it, I said, not looking up. Sit down, Dante. You are scaring the boy. I don't care, he yelled. He was pacing now, the alcohol fueling his entitlement. It is not fair. You are sitting on all this wealth, hoarding it like a dragon while we are struggling. We are your family. We are supposed to inherit this. There it was. The truth. It always comes out when they get angry. You are supposed to inherit this, I repeated slowly. Yes, Dante screamed. He threw his hands up. It is going to be mine anyway. When you die, it all comes to me. I am the only heir. So why make us wait? Why make us suffer in poverty while you live in a mansion? He leaned over the table, his face twisted with greed and rage. Do you know how much the government is going to take in inheritance tax if you die without a plan? He hissed. 40%, Dad. 40% of everything you built will go to Uncle Sam because you are too stupid to transfer the assets now. If you sign the company over to me now, we can put it in a trust. We can save millions. It is just logic. I stopped eating. I placed my fork and knife parallel on the plate. I looked at my son, really looked at him. I didn't see a businessman. I didn't see a partner. I saw a vulture circling a dying animal, waiting for it to stop breathing so he could feast. He wasn't here to reconnect. He wasn't here because he missed me. He was here because he thought I was dying soon, and he wanted to make sure he got the money before the tax man did. He didn't want to run the company. He wanted to liquidate it. I stood up. I am 73 years old, but I felt 10 feet tall. You are worried about taxes, I asked quietly. I am worried about the legacy, Dante lied. I looked at Tiffany. She wasn't stopping him. She was watching me, calculating the odds, waiting to see if I would fold. Legacy, I said, testing the word. You talk about legacy. Legacy isn't money, Dante. Legacy is character, and right now your account is overdrawn. I threw my napkin on the table. Dinner is over, I said. I walked toward the door. Where are you going? Dante yelled after me. We are not done talking about this. We are done, I said without turning back. And Dante, don't worry about the inheritance tax. I stopped at the doorway and looked back at them one last time. You only pay tax on what you receive. I walked out of the room, leaving the threat hanging in the air. I heard Tiffany whispering furiously to Dante, but I didn't care. I went straight to my office and locked the door. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from clarity. They thought they were playing chess. They thought they could bully an old man into signing over his life's work. I sat down at my desk and pulled out the file I had started earlier. If they wanted a war over my assets, I would give them one. But they were going to find out very quickly that the fortune of Augustus Miller was not a pie to be sliced. It was a fortress, and I was about to pull up the drawbridge. I picked up my phone and opened the banking app. It was time to make some transfers. It was time to make sure that if they tried to steal from me, they would find nothing but dust. But first, I had to protect the only thing in that house that actually mattered. I looked at the camera feed again. Leo was sitting alone at the huge dining table. His parents were arguing in the corner. The boy was pushing his mashed potatoes around, looking small and forgotten. I am sorry, Leo, I whispered to the screen. This is going to get ugly. I closed the app and opened my contact list. I scrolled down to a number I hadn't called in years. A private investigator I used back when I had employee theft issues. Hello, Frank, I said when he picked up. It is Gus Miller. I need a background check, full scope, financial, criminal, and medical, on my son and his wife. And Frank, I need it by tomorrow morning. I hung up. I leaned back in my chair. They wanted to talk about my death. Fine. Let's see whose skeletons we can dig up first. The following morning, the house felt different. It was not just occupied, it was divided. Lines had been drawn on the floor, invisible to the naked eye, but clear as day to anyone paying attention. The living room belonged to Dante and his hangover. The kitchen belonged to Tiffany and her demands. And Leo, my grandson, was the prisoner of war caught in the middle. I came downstairs at 7, expecting to see the boy watching cartoons. He was there sitting on the floor with his tablet, but as soon as I walked into the room, Tiffany appeared from the kitchen like a guard dog. She stepped between me and the boy, blocking my path. Leo, go to your room, she said sharply. The boy looked up. But Mom, Grandpa is here. I said go, she snapped. Leo scrambled up and ran toward the stairs, casting one last look at me. I watched him go. Then I turned my gaze to the woman standing in front of me with her arms crossed. Is this necessary? I asked. You are treating the boy like I am contagious. Tiffany smirked. She took a sip of her coffee, which I noticed she had made using my premium Jamaican Blue Mountain beans. You are contagious, Gus, she said. Your attitude is contagious. Your negativity is contagious. I don't want Leo absorbing your toxic energy. He is a sensitive child. He needs nurturing, not whatever it is you are. I stepped around her to get to the coffee pot. I am his grandfather, I said, and this is my house. You cannot keep him from me. Tiffany laughed. Watch me. Unless... She let the word hang in the air. I poured my coffee black and turned to face her. Unless what I asked. She inspected her fingernails. Unless you start contributing to his development. You see, Gus, raising a child in this economy is expensive. Private schools, tutors, extracurricular activities, it adds up. Leo has been dying to go to this space camp in Florida. It is a prestigious program for gifted children, but with our current liquidity issues thanks to that crook landlord, we just cannot afford it. She looked up at me and her eyes were flat and hard. It is $5,000, she said. If you pay for it, maybe I will believe you actually care about his future. Then maybe we can talk about unsupervised visitation. It was a ransom demand, pure and simple. She was holding my relationship with my grandson hostage for $5,000. I looked at her. I knew she expected me to explode. She expected me to yell about extortion. But I didn't get to where I am by losing my temper. I got here by outsmarting the competition. Space camp, I said. That sounds educational. Do you have the brochure? She blinked, surprised by my calmness. She pulled a crumpled pamphlet out of her back pocket. She had it ready. She had been planning this since they parked the truck. "Here," she said, handing it to me. "The registration deadline is today. If you write me a check now, I can go deposit it and wire the money before noon. Make it out to Tiffany Miller." I took the brochure. I put on my reading glasses. It was a legitimate camp. I saw the phone number at the bottom. $5,000 is a lot of money, I said. "For you?" Tiffany scoffed. "Please. I saw your ledger, Gus. That is pocket change for you. Don't be stingy. It is for Leo." I pulled out my phone. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice tightening. "I am calling them," I said, dialing the number. "If my grandson is going to space camp, I want to make sure he gets the best package." I put the phone to my ear. Tiffany's eyes widened. "Wait," she said, reaching for the phone. "You don't have to call them. Just give me the check. It is easier." "Hello," I said into the phone, ignoring her. "Yes, my name is Augustus Miller. I would like to register my grandson Leo Miller for your upcoming session." "Yes. The full package. Uniforms, flight suit, everything." I listened for a moment while Tiffany paced around the kitchen like a trapped cat. $5,200, I said, repeating the number the lady gave me. "Fine. I will pay by credit card right now. Yes, take the number." I recited my card number out loud while staring directly at Tiffany. Her face went from anxious to furious. Her jaw tightened so hard I thought her teeth might crack. "Thank you," I said. "Email the confirmation to me. Goodbye." I hung up. "There," I said. "Leo is going to space camp. I paid for the deluxe flight suit, too." Tiffany did not say thank you. She looked at me with pure venom. "Why did you do that?" she hissed. "Do what I asked innocently. I paid for the camp. Isn't that what you wanted? I wanted you to give me the money," she screamed. Her voice cracked. "I am his mother. You should trust me to handle his finances." "How do I know you actually paid?" "You just wanted to control the situation. You are a control freak." I took a sip of my coffee. "I paid them directly, Tiffany, because I don't pay ransoms to kidnappers. And I certainly don't give cash to people who don't have a job." She slammed her hand on the counter. "You are impossible. You think you are so smart. Well, guess what? You just bought a ticket for him to leave. He will be gone for 2 weeks. Money well spent, old man." She stormed out of the kitchen. I stood there feeling no victory. I knew what she was going to do next. She was going to poison the well. I checked the camera feed on my phone. Tiffany was in Leo's room. She was throwing clothes into a suitcase. "Why are you mad?" Mom Leo asked, sitting on his bed. "Because your grandfather is a selfish man," Tiffany said loud enough for the microphone to pick up clearly. "He has all this money, Leo, millions of dollars, but he makes Mommy beg for pennies. He doesn't love us. He thinks we are beggars. He just paid for your camp to get rid of you because he doesn't want you making noise in his precious house." "No, he didn't," Leo said, his voice small. "He likes me. He likes his money," Tiffany snapped. "Remember that, Leo? People like him only care about their bank accounts. He will never help us. We are on our own." I turned off the feed. My hand was shaking. That was the narrative she was building. The rich miser grandfather against the poor, struggling family. I needed to break that narrative, and I needed to do it today before she sent him away. I walked up the stairs. I didn't knock. I pushed the door to Leo's room open. Tiffany spun around. "Get out," she said. "We are packing." I ignored her. I looked at Leo. "Put your shoes on, son," I said. Leo looked at his mother. "Where are we going?" he asked. "I am going to work," I said. "And since I just paid for your astronaut training, I think it is time you saw where the money comes from. You are coming with me." Tiffany stepped forward. "Absolutely not," she said. "He is not going to some dirty factory. It is dangerous." I looked at her. "You said you wanted him to have an abundance mindset," I said, quoting her own words. "Well, I am going to show him how abundance is created. It is not created by complaining, Tiffany. It is created by sweat." I turned to Leo. "There is a vending machine there with all the soda you can drink," I said. "And a forklift." Leo's eyes lit up. "A forklift?" I held out my hand. "Let's go." Tiffany wanted to stop him. I saw her muscles tense, but she knew she had lost this round. If she stopped him now after I paid for the camp, she would look like the villain. "Fine," she spat, "but if he comes back with a single scratch on him, I am suing you." We walked out to my truck. Not the luxury sedan Dante wanted me to buy, but the beat-up Ford F-150 I had driven for 20 years. Leo climbed into the passenger seat, looking at the cracked dashboard with curiosity. "Why is your truck so old, Grandpa?" he asked as we pulled onto the highway. "Mom said you are rich." I shifted gears. "Rich is a state of mind, Leo," I said. "Wealth is what you have in the bank. Being rich means you don't have to impress people you don't like." We drove in silence for a while until the smell hit us. It is a specific smell: vinegar, molasses, cayenne pepper, and hickory smoke. To some people it stinks. To me it smells like freedom. We pulled up to the Miller's Gold production facility. It is a massive brick building that takes up a whole city block. Trucks were lined up at the loading dock. Steam was rising from the vents. Leo's mouth dropped open. "You own this?" he asked. I parked the truck. "I built this," I corrected him. "Come on." We walked onto the floor. The noise was deafening. Bottles, clinking machinery, humming, people shouting orders. But as soon as they saw me, the noise seemed to change. "Hey, boss!" a man on a forklift shouted, waving. "Morning, Mr. Miller," a woman in a hairnet called out. I waved back. I put a hard hat on Leo's head. It was way too big for him and slid down over his eyes. He giggled, pushing it back up. I took him to the heart of the factory, the cooking floor. There were 5 massive stainless steel vats, each holding 500 gallons of boiling sauce. The heat was intense. "This is the engine room," I yelled over the noise. I introduced him to Big Mike, my floor foreman. Mike is a mountain of a man with tattoos on his neck and a heart of gold. "Mike, this is my grandson Leo," I said. Mike wiped his giant hand on his apron and shook Leo's small hand. "Well, I be Mike," boomed, the heir apparent. "Nice to meet you, young man. Your granddaddy is the hardest working man in Georgia. You got big shoes to fill." Leo looked at his hand, then at me. "He called me the heir," he whispered. I didn't answer. I led him to the quality control line. I picked a bottle off the belt. It was still warm. The label was black and gold with my signature on it. "Look at the name," I said, pointing to the label. "Miller's Gold," Leo read. "Miller," I said. "That is your name. It is not just a label. It is a promise. It means that what is inside this bottle is the best we can make. It means we didn't cut corners." I opened the bottle and dipped a plastic spoon in it. "Taste it," I said. Leo hesitated, then put the spoon in his mouth. His eyes went wide. It was tangy, sweet, and spicy all at once. "It is good," he shouted. "Really good," I smiled. That is the first smile I had felt on my face in days. "That sauce bought the house you are sleeping in," I said. "It paid for your space camp. And it was made by people like Big Mike who work 10 hours a day to feed their families." I knelt down so I was eye level with him. "Your mother says I am stingy, Leo, but you need to understand something. Money is like water. If you just drink it, it is gone. If you use it to water the seeds, it grows. I don't give your parents money because they just drink it. I want to teach you how to plant seeds." Leo looked at the bottling line, watching the thousands of golden bottles marching like soldiers. "Can I work here?" he asked. I laughed. "Maybe. Start by sweeping the floor." That is where I started. We spent the rest of the afternoon there. Leo swept the break room. He helped Mike count boxes. He ate a ham sandwich from the vending machine like it was a gourmet meal. For 4 hours he wasn't a pawn in a power struggle. He was just a boy with a grandfather. Driving home, the sun was setting. The mood in the truck was light. Leo was holding a bottle of sauce on his lap like a trophy. "Grandpa," he said quietly. "Yeah, son, Mom says you are going away soon." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. The warmth of the afternoon evaporated instantly. "Going away?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Where does she think I am going?" "To the home," Leo said. "The place for old people. She said that when you go into the nursing home next month, she is going to turn your bedroom into a game room for me. She said you won't need it anymore because you won't remember who we are anyway." I stared at the road ahead. The white lines blurred for a second. Next month. She had a timeline. She wasn't just hoping I would die. She was planning to institutionalize me. She had probably already filled out the paperwork claiming I was incompetent. That was why she wanted the medical power of attorney. Leo looked at me, his big eyes full of innocence. "Are you going, Grandpa?" "I don't want the game room. I want you to stay." I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "I am not going anywhere, Leo," I said. "And neither are you." But inside my head, the war drums were beating louder than ever. They were targeting my freedom. They were planning to lock me away and strip mine my life while I sat drooling in a wheelchair. I pulled into the driveway of the mansion. The lights were on. Tiffany and Dante were inside, probably drinking my wine and planning my demise. I turned off the engine. "Leo," I said, "go inside and wash up. Don't tell your mom what we talked about. It is our secret." "Our secret," he agreed. He ran inside, clutching his bottle of sauce. I sat in the truck for a moment in the dark. I needed to act fast. If they filed for guardianship claiming dementia, I would be tied up in court for months. My assets would be frozen. They would win by attrition. I needed a nuclear option. I took out my phone and called Saul again. "It is Friday night," Gus Saul complained. "I am at a brisket dinner." "Put down the brisket, Saul," I said. "I need you to hire a neurologist, the best one in the state. I need a full cognitive evaluation. Brain scans, IQ test, psychiatric screening, everything. Why, Gus?" "Because I need a certificate of sanity dated yesterday," I said. "And Saul, draft the eviction notice, but don't serve it yet. I want to wait until the party." "The party?" "Yes. The company anniversary party next Saturday. They want to play Happy Family in public fine. We will give them a show they will never forget." I hung up and walked toward the house. I wasn't just an old man anymore. I was a general walking onto a battlefield. And I had just secured my most important ally, the truth. The 10th anniversary of Miller's Gold was not just a party, it was a coronation of hard work. I had spent weeks planning it, not because I care about hors d'oeuvres or champagne fountains, but because I wanted to honor the people who helped me build this. The garden of my estate was transformed. String lights hung from the ancient oak trees like captured stars. A jazz quartet played soft, soulful tunes in the corner. The air smelled of jasmine and the slow-roasted pork sliders that made my company famous. The guest list was a roll call of my journey. There was Senator Williams, who helped me get the zoning permits for my first factory when no one else would listen. There was Sarah Jenkins, the buyer for the grocery chain, who took a chance on a black man with a spicy recipe and a dream. And there were my employees, my floor managers, my delivery drivers, and my administrative staff, all dressed in their Sunday best, holding glasses of sparkling cider and walking with their heads held high. I stood on the patio, looking down at the gathering, feeling a swell of pride in my chest. For a moment, I forgot about the vultures living in my guest room. I forgot about the legal pad in my pocket and the cameras in the kitchen. I was just Gus Miller, the man who made it. But peace is a fragile thing, especially when you have grenades living under your roof. At 8 o'clock, the double doors to the terrace banged open. The jazz band faltered for a second. The conversation near the steps died down. Dante and Tiffany made their entrance. They were not on the guest list, but they walked out like they were the guests of honor. Dante was wearing a white tuxedo that looked ridiculous, a rental that was too tight in the shoulders. He had a cigar in his mouth that was not lit. But it was Tiffany who made the crowd stare. She was wearing a red sequined dress that was cut so low and slit so high it belonged in a nightclub, not a garden party. She was holding a martini glass that was already half empty, and she was walking with the unsteady confidence of someone who had started drinking hours ago. I watched them descend the stone steps. They didn't mingle. They patrolled. Tiffany grabbed the arm of Senator Williams before he could escape. "Senator," she practically shouted, her voice cutting through the jazz. "I am Tiffany Miller, the future of this company. We must do lunch. I have so many ideas about policy reform." The senator looked at me, his eyes pleading for rescue. I started to move toward them, but they had already moved on. They were working the room, handing out business cards that I didn't even know they had printed. I saw Dante cornering the vice president of the bank, loudly boasting about an expansion plan that didn't exist. My jaw tightened. They were treating my business partners like marks at a carnival. But what made my blood truly run cold was how they treated my staff. I saw Tiffany snap her fingers at Marcus, one of my oldest delivery drivers, who was simply holding a plate of food. "Hey you," she said. "Get me a refill, vodka. Neat, and make it quick." Marcus is 60 years old. He is a deacon in his church. He looked at her with quiet dignity. "Ma'am, the bar is over there," he said politely. Tiffany's face twisted. "Do not talk back to me. I am a Miller. You work for us. Now fetch the drink before I have you fired." I was moving now, cutting through the crowd like an icebreaker ship, but I wasn't fast enough. Tiffany stumbled toward the buffet table where Maria was arranging the dessert tray. Maria has been my housekeeper and friend for 15 years. She is the woman who sat with me when Bessie died. She is the one who made sure I ate when I was too grief-stricken to cook. Tonight she was running the catering because she insisted that no outside caterer could make the peach cobbler right. Tiffany picked up a piece of cobbler, took a bite, and spat it out onto the grass right next to Maria's shoes. Ugh, she groaned loud enough for half the garden to hear. This is disgusting. It is pure sugar. Who made this? Maria froze. Mrs. Miller, I made it, she said softly. It is Mr. Gus's favorite recipe. Tiffany laughed a cruel, jagged sound. Well, Mr. Gus has the palate of a peasant, she said, and you look like one too. Look at you. You are sweating. It is unhygienic. Go back to the kitchen where you belong and send out someone presentable to serve the guests. We don't want the help mingling with the elite, do we? The silence that fell over the garden was heavy and instant. The jazz band stopped playing. The senator put down his glass. Every eye was on Tiffany and Maria. Maria looked down at her feet, her hands trembling. That was it. The line was not just crossed, it was obliterated. I stepped into the circle of light. I didn't look at the crowd. I looked at Tiffany. Apologize, I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried the authority of 50 years of command. Tiffany turned to me, swaying slightly. Her eyes were glassy and unfocused. Oh, Gus, lighten up, she slurred. I am just giving her some constructive criticism. The service here is terrible. Dante and I will change all of this when we take over. We will hire professional staff, not whatever this is. She waved her hand at Maria dismissively. I stepped closer. I could smell the vodka on her breath. Maria is not the help, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. She is family, which is more than I can say for you right now. You are drunk, you are rude, and you are embarrassing yourself. Tiffany's eyes narrowed. She took a step toward me, getting in my face. Embarrassing myself. I am the only one here with any class? You are the one embarrassing us. Gus. Look at this party. It is a backyard barbecue, pretending to be a gala. You are a joke, and everyone here knows it. I turned to the edge of the patio where my head of security, a massive former Marine named Big Tiny, was standing. I nodded once. Tiny, I said, please escort Mrs. Miller to her room. If she resists, remove her from the property. Tiny moved instantly. He is a gentle giant, but when he moves with purpose. He stepped up to Tiffany. Ma'am, it is time to go, he said, his voice deep and calm. Tiffany shrieked, Do not touch me, Dante. Dante, help. He is assaulting me. Dante, who had been busy trying to impress a banker near the fountain, finally noticed what was happening. He saw his wife being corralled by security. He saw his father standing there with a face like stone. He saw the crowd judging them. And he snapped. He didn't snap at Tiffany. He snapped at me. He rushed over, throwing his drink into the bushes. Get your hands off her, Dante screamed, pushing Tiny. Tiny didn't budge an inch. Dante turned to me, his face purple with rage. What is wrong with you? You humiliate her in front of everyone at your own party. She insulted Maria, I said. She is drunk, Dante. Take her upstairs, now. Dante looked around. He saw the stairs. He felt the judgment. And instead of retreating, he decided to burn the house down. He decided this was the moment to launch the narrative they had been building. He laughed a manic, desperate laugh. He pointed a shaking finger at Maria, then at me. Maria, that is what this is about. The maid. He turned to the crowd, spreading his arms wide, addressing the senator and the bankers and the suppliers. You see this, everyone. You see what we have to deal with. My father is not himself. He is being manipulated. He pointed at Maria again. She controls him. She feeds him pills. She tells him what to do. He is 73 years old and he is losing his mind. He forgets things. He gets aggressive. He is paranoid. Dante, I warned him, stepping forward. Stop. No, I won't stop, Dante yelled, backing away. Look at him. He is threatening me, his own son. He is unfit to run this company. He is unfit to make decisions. He needs help, and that woman is taking advantage of him to steal his money. The crowd gasped. A low murmur rippled through the garden. To an outsider, to someone who didn't know me, it might have looked plausible. An old man, a young maid, a son claiming concern. It was a poisonous seed planted in fertile ground. Dante grabbed Tiffany, who was sobbing dramatically now. We are leaving, Dante announced. We are going to our room to protect ourselves. But mark my words, this is not over. We will not let this company be destroyed by a senile old man and his keeper." He dragged Tiffany toward the house. As they climbed the stairs, Tiffany turned back and screamed one last thing. "Enjoy your party, Gus. It will be your last one." The door slammed shut. The echo rang across the silent garden. I stood there alone in the center of the lawn. I could feel the eyes on me. I could feel the doubt creeping into the minds of my investors. Was Gus getting too old? Was he really losing it? Maria stepped forward, wiping her eyes. "Mr. Gus, I am so sorry," she whispered. "I should have just—" I put a hand on her shoulder, silencing her. "You did nothing wrong, Maria. Lift your head up." I turned to the microphone stand where the band had been playing. I walked over and took the mic. My hand was steady. "I am sorry for the interruption, folks," I said, my voice booming over the speakers. "Every family has its drama. Mine just happens to be a bit louder than most. But let me assure you of one thing. My mind is sharp, my memory is clear, and the only thing I am losing is my patience with disrespect." I signaled the band. "Play something upbeat," I said. "We are celebrating 10 years of survival. A little noise isn't going to stop us now." The band started playing. The guests slowly went back to their conversations, but the air had changed. The festive mood was gone, replaced by a tense curiosity. I stepped off the small stage and walked toward the bar to get a water. I needed to clear my head. I needed to think about damage control. As I reached the edge of the patio, a hand touched my elbow. I turned. It was Jim Sterling, one of my oldest distribution partners, a man who had known me for 20 years, a man who sat on the board of the bank that held my business accounts. "Jim," I said, trying to smile, "I apologize for the scene. Dante is, going through a rough patch." Jim didn't smile. He looked around to make sure no one was listening, then he leaned in close. "Gus, listen to me," he whispered. "This isn't just a rough patch. You need to be careful." "What do you mean?" I asked. Jim took a sip of his drink, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Dante was talking to me earlier," he said, "before the screaming started. He wasn't talking about expansion, Gus. He was asking me questions. Specific questions." "What kind of questions?" I asked, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. "He was asking about the bank's protocols for frozen assets," Jim said. "He was asking what kind of medical documentation is required to trigger a power of attorney clause. He asked me if I knew a good lawyer who specializes in the Baker Act." The Baker Act. The law that allows for involuntary institutionalization of people deemed a danger to themselves or others. I stared at Jim. "He asked you that?" "Yes," Jim said. "And Gus, he wasn't asking hypothetically. He was taking notes." I looked up at the second-floor window of my house. The light was on in the master bedroom. I could see 2 shadows moving behind the curtains. They weren't just drunk. The scene in the garden wasn't an accident. It was a performance. It was evidence creation. They wanted witnesses to see me get aggressive. They wanted the senator and the bankers to hear Dante claim I was crazy. It was all part of the plan. "Thank you, Jim," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Thank you for telling me." Jim squeezed my arm. "Watch your back, Gus. They are not here to visit. They are here to commit you." I walked away from the party. I walked into the darkness of the side yard where the noise of the jazz band faded away. I looked at the moon. They wanted to prove I was crazy. They wanted to prove I was a danger. Fine. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened the app connected to the cameras. I rewound the footage to 10 minutes ago. I found the clip of Tiffany spitting the food. I found the clip of Dante screaming. I saved it. Then I called Saul. "I don't care what time it is, Saul," I said. "I want the eviction notice ready for Monday morning. But before that, I need you to file a restraining order." "Against who?" Saul asked sleepily. "Against my son," I said, "before he files one against me." I looked back at the house. The war had officially begun, and the first casualty was going to be their arrogance. The fog in my head was getting thicker. For 3 days straight, I had woken up in my leather armchair in the study with a stiff neck and a line of drool on my chin. I am a man who wakes up at 5 in the morning without an alarm clock. I am a man who can work a 12-hour shift on a factory floor and still have energy to mow the lawn. But lately I felt like I was moving through wet concrete. My eyelids felt heavy by 7 in the evening. My thoughts were sluggish like oil in winter. At first I thought it was just the stress. Having enemies inside your perimeter wears a man down. But then I noticed the pattern. The fatigue didn't hit me in the morning. It didn't hit me at the office. It only hit me about 30 minutes after dinner. The dinner that Tiffany insisted on cooking every single night. "You need your strength, Gus," she would say, placing a steaming bowl of soup in front of me. "Homemade tomato bisque, full of antioxidants. Eat up." She watched me eat. That was the tell. She didn't look at her own plate. She didn't look at Dante. She watched my spoon go from the bowl to my mouth with the intensity of a hawk watching a field mouse. And when I finished the last drop, she would smile. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the satisfied smile of a mechanic who just tightened the last bolt on a machine. On Tuesday night, she made clam chowder. It was thick and creamy, and it tasted slightly bitter. Just a hint. Like lemon rind. "Is the soup okay, Gus?" she asked, leaning forward. I looked at her. I looked at Dante, who was shoveling food into his mouth, ignoring us. "It is fine," I said. "Just a little salty." I took one more spoonful, then I pretended to cough. I grabbed my napkin and brought it to my mouth. In that split second, I spit the mouthful of soup into the thick cloth. I did it again a minute later. Then I poured the rest of the bowl into the empty flower vase on the center of the table when she turned to get more wine. I finished my meal. I yawned. I played the part. "I think I am going to turn in early," I said, rubbing my eyes. Tiffany beamed. "Good idea, Gus. You look exhausted. Sleep is the best medicine." I walked up the stairs, gripping the banister like an old man. I went into my room and locked the door. But I didn't go to sleep. I went into the bathroom and pulled a plastic Ziploc bag out of my pocket. I squeezed the napkin into it, capturing the soggy remains of the chowder. Then I took the flower vase which I had smuggled under my jacket and poured the rest of the sample in. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from rage. I knew what I held in that bag. I just needed science to prove it. The next morning I left the house before they woke up. I drove straight to the Miller's Gold Quality Assurance Lab. My head chemist is a woman named Dr. Eris. She has a PhD in food science, and she treats every batch of sauce like it is rocket fuel. I walked into her lab and placed the bag on the steel table. "Morning, Gus," she said, looking at the bag. "New prototype." "No," I said, "just leftovers. I need a full toxicology screen on this, Eris. I am looking for contaminants, pharmaceutical ones." She looked at me, then she looked at the bag. She didn't ask questions. She knew me better than that. "I will have results by lunch," she said. I went to my office and tried to work, but my mind was back at the house. While they were sleeping, I had done one more thing. I had finally activated the cameras I installed in the kitchen. I had hidden the lens in the gap between the microwave and the cabinet. It had a perfect view of the stove and the prep island. I sat at my desk and opened the app on my tablet. I scrolled back to 5 in the afternoon the previous day. The video loaded. It was in high definition. I saw Tiffany walk into the kitchen. She was wearing her yoga pants and sipping wine. She opened the pantry and took out a can of soup, store-bought. She poured it into a pot. Then she reached into her pocket. I leaned closer to the screen. My heart was hammering against my ribs. She pulled out a small orange prescription bottle. She shook 2 white pills into her hand, then 2 more. 4 pills. She put them on the cutting board and used the bottom of a heavy glass to crush them into a fine powder. She swept the powder into the pot of soup. She stirred it. She hummed a little tune while she did it. Then Dante walked in. My son, my flesh and blood. He walked right up to the counter. He saw the orange bottle sitting there. He saw the white residue on the cutting board. "What is for dinner?" he asked, looking at the pot. Chowder, Tiffany said. "Special recipe for your dad. He has been so high-strung lately. This will help him relax." Dante looked at the bottle. He picked it up. He read the label. Xanax, he read out loud. 2 milligrams. "Tiff, isn't this a bit heavy? This could knock out a horse." Tiffany snatched the bottle back. "He is a big guy," she said. "Besides, we need him pliable, Dante. The lawyer is coming on Friday. If he is sharp, he won't sign. If he is groggy and confused, he will sign anything just to go to bed. Do you want the money or not?" Dante looked at the soup. He looked at the pills. He had a choice right there. He could have poured the soup down the sink. He could have yelled at her. He could have been a man. Instead, he shrugged. "Just make sure he doesn't wake up in the middle of the night," he said. "I don't want to deal with him wandering around." He walked to the fridge and grabbed a beer. I paused the video. I sat there in the silence of my office. I felt a tear run down my cheek. It was a hot, angry tear. I wiped it away. That was the moment I stopped having a son. That was the moment Dante died to me. He wasn't just a moocher anymore. He was an accomplice to poisoning. My phone buzzed. It was Dr. Eris. "Gus," she said, her voice serious. "You need to go to the hospital." "What did you find?" I asked. "Alprazolam," she said. "A massive dose. And traces of zolpidem. Sleeping pills, Gus. If you had eaten that whole bowl with your blood pressure medication, it could have stopped your heart." "Who gave you this?" I stared at the freeze frame of Dante drinking his beer. "Nobody," I said. "I just wanted to check a suspicion." "Thanks, Eris. Destroy the sample, but keep the report." I drove home that evening with a feeling of ice in my veins. I walked into the house and they were sitting in the living room watching TV. They looked so normal, so domestic. Tiffany smiled when she saw me. "Hungry, Gus?" she asked. "I am making lasagna tonight." "I am not hungry," I said, walking past them. I ate at the office. I went to my room and locked the door. I moved the dresser in front of it. I wasn't taking any chances. I spent the night reviewing my will and organizing my files. I knew the attack was coming. They were drugging me to make me look incompetent, and now that I had refused the food, they would have to accelerate their timeline. The next morning I was drinking coffee on the porch when a car pulled up. It wasn't a U-Haul this time. It was a sedan with a government seal on the door. A man in a cheap suit walked up the driveway. He looked nervous. "Augustus Miller?" he asked. "That is me." He handed me a thick manila envelope. "You have been served, sir." I opened the envelope. My hands didn't shake this time. I knew what it was before I read the header. Petition for emergency guardianship. Petitioner Dante Miller. Reason advanced dementia and incapacity to manage assets. I read the sworn statement attached to it. It was a work of fiction that would make Stephen King jealous. It claimed I was hallucinating. It claimed I had forgotten my own name. It claimed I had become violent and aggressive toward family members, citing the incident at the party as proof. And the cherry on top was a statement from a doctor I had never met claiming my symptoms consistent with rapid onset Alzheimer's. I looked up. Dante and Tiffany were standing in the doorway. They weren't hiding anymore. Tiffany had her arms crossed, a triumphant smirk plastered on her face. Dante looked solemn, pretending to be the heartbroken son doing what was best for his ailing father. "I am sorry, Dad," Dante said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "We had to do it. You are not well. You are a danger to yourself. The court agreed to an emergency hearing tomorrow. Until then..." He pulled a piece of paper out of his pocket. "Until then, I have temporary power of attorney over the household decisions." Tiffany stepped forward, which means she said, her eyes gleaming, "No more locking doors, Gus. No more secrets. We are in charge now. For your own safety, of course." I looked at the court order in my hand. Then I looked at the camera hidden in the porch light above their heads. "You think you have won," I said quietly. "It is not about winning." "Dad," Dante sighed, "it is about care. We are going to take good care of you. We found a lovely facility in the countryside, very quiet, very secure. A facility. A prison." I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. I stood up. "You filed this under oath?" "Dante," I asked. "Yes," he said. "And you swore that I am mentally incompetent." "It is the truth, Dad." "Look at you. You are paranoid." I nodded. "Okay," I said. "We will see what the judge says." I walked past them into the house. They stepped aside, letting me pass like I was a harmless ghost. They thought the game was over. They thought the piece of paper gave them the keys to the kingdom. But they forgot one thing. When you trap a lion in a corner, you don't check his teeth to see if they are sharp. You run. I went to my study. They hadn't changed the locks yet. I called Saul. "Did you get the footage?" I asked. "I got it," Gus Saul said. His voice was trembling with excitement. This is attempted murder, Gus. And perjury." "I know," I said. "The hearing is tomorrow at 9, Saul said. "Do you want me to file for a continuance?" "No," I said. "Let it happen. Let them stand in front of a judge and lie. Let them put it all on the record." But Gus Saul warned. "If the judge believes them..." "He won't," I said. "Because I am bringing a witness they didn't account for." "Who?" "Science," I said. "And a very interesting movie I produced in my kitchen." I hung up. I could hear Tiffany laughing in the hallway. She was probably already picking out curtains for the master bedroom. Let them laugh. Tomorrow the gavel would drop, and it was going to sound like a gunshot. The executioner arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. He did not carry an axe, he carried a leather briefcase made of calf skin, and he wore a suit that cost more than my first truck. His name was Mr. Thorne, and he was the kind of lawyer who chased ambulances until he realized there was more money in chasing inheritances. He walked into my house with the confidence of a man who had already spent his commission check. I watched him from the top of the stairs. I watched Dante shake his hand with a sweaty grip. I watched Tiffany offer him coffee with a smile that showed too many teeth. They were vibrating. That is the only word for it. They were literally vibrating with the anticipation of the kill. I took a deep breath. I looked at the picture of Bessie in the hallway. "Give me strength, old girl," I whispered. "This is going to be the hardest acting role of my life." I let my shoulders slump. I relaxed the muscles in my face until my jaw hung slightly loose. I took off my reading glasses and put them in my pocket, leaving my eyes exposed and blinking in the morning light. I shuffled down the stairs, holding the banister with both hands, taking one slow, painful step at a time. Dante looked up. For a second, I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes, but it was extinguished instantly by the greed. "Good morning, Dad," he said, his voice loud and slow like he was talking to a toddler. "Look who is here. It is Mr. Thorne. He is here to help us with the paperwork. Remember we talked about this?" I stared at him blankly for a moment before nodding. "Paperwork," I mumbled. "Yes. For the rest." "Exactly," Dante said. "For the rest." He guided me to the dining table. They had set it up like a boardroom. The surface was covered in stacks of documents, thick, heavy bonded paper, the kind of paper that changes lives. "Sit here, Gus," Tiffany said, pulling out my chair. I sat. I looked at the papers. The words were small and dense. To anyone else, they looked like standard legal jargon. But I have been reading contracts for 40 years. I saw the keywords immediately: durable power of attorney, irrevocable transfer of assets, medical guardianship. They weren't just taking the company, they were taking my freedom. The medical clause gave Dante the right to admit me to any facility he chose and to make all decisions regarding my end-of-life care. He could lock me away and throw away the key. He could pull the plug if I got a cold. Mr. Thorne slid a pen across the table. It was a heavy gold fountain pen. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice oily and smooth, "I have prepared everything in accordance with your son's instructions. This will streamline your estate and ensure that your medical needs are met without you having to worry about the details. It is a very standard procedure for men of your condition, my condition, the condition of having a rich bank account and an ungrateful son." I picked up the pen. My hand trembled. I didn't have to fake the trembling. The rage inside me was doing that for me. Where do I sign?" I asked. Mr. Thorne flipped to the last page of the thickest document. He pointed to a line at the bottom. "Right there, Mr. Miller. Just above your printed name." I lowered the pen to the paper. The tip hovered just millimeters above the line. The room went silent. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hall. I could hear Tiffany's breathing. It was shallow and fast. She was leaning forward, her eyes locked on the tip of the pen. She was mentally counting the money. $15 million. A chalet in Aspen. A new life. I stopped. I pulled the pen back. Dante let out a sound like a deflating tire. "What is it, Dad?" he asked. "Is something wrong?" I looked up at him. I let my eyes fill with tears. I looked at my son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the boy I held when he scraped his knee, the boy who was now sitting there waiting for me to sign my own death warrant. I want to make sure," I whispered. "Make sure of what, Dad?" Dante asked, impatient now. I looked around the room. I looked at the walls. "The house," I said. "Your mother's house. You won't sell it, will you?" I promised her. I promised her I would keep the garden the way she liked it, and the shrine in the hallway. You won't let strangers take it." Dante didn't even blink. He didn't look at the house. He looked at the pen in my hand. "Of course not, Dad," he lied. "We are keeping the house. We are going to live here, remember. We will take care of the garden. We will light a candle for Mom every day. I promise." I looked at Tiffany. "And Leo," I asked, "you will use the money for him, for his school. He is a smart boy. He wants to be an astronaut." Tiffany rolled her eyes but quickly covered it with a fake smile. "Gus, we are doing this for Leo. Every penny is for his future." We are going to put it all in a trust for him. He will go to the best schools. He will be the first Miller to go to space. I swear. Lies. Pure, unadulterated lies. They were selling the house to a developer who wanted to tear it down. They were planning to spend the money on themselves. Leo would be lucky if he saw a dime, but I needed them to say it. I needed them to put their betrayal into words. Okay, I said softly. I believe you. You are good children. I lowered the pen again. Dante and Tiffany exchanged a look. It was a look of pure triumph. They thought they had won. They thought the old man was finally broken. I pressed the pen to the paper. The ink bled slightly into the fibers. I started to write, but I didn't write Augustus Miller. In the banking world, especially when you deal with high-level corporate accounts, there are security protocols. Years ago, after the first time Dante stole from me, I set up a fail-safe with my bank and my legal team. It is called a duress signature. It is a specific way of signing that looks like a messy version of your name, but contains a specific, deliberate error. If I sign normally, everything is valid. If I sign with the duress signature, it means I am being coerced. It triggers an immediate freeze on all assets. It alerts the fraud department. And most importantly, it renders the document legally void from the moment the ink dries. I moved my hand. I wrote an A, then I let the pen jerk. I scribbled a jagged line that looked like a U but was actually an upside-down V. I dragged the tail of the S down so it cut through the line below. It looked like the handwriting of a man with Parkinson's. It looked like a mess. But to the optical scanner at the bank, it was a silent alarm screaming for help. There, I whispered, dropping the pen. Dante snatched the paper before the ink was even dry. He didn't look at the signature to check the spelling. He just saw ink on the line. He saw the seal of ownership. He held the document up to the light like it was a holy grail. Done, he said. His voice was breathless. It is done. Tiffany let out a squeal and hugged him. We did it, she screamed. Oh my God, we actually did it. Mr. Thorne closed his briefcase with a snap. Congratulations, Mr. Miller, he said to Dante. You are now the legal guardian of your father and the sole executor of the Miller estate. I will file these with the court immediately. The transfer of funds should be authorized within 24 hours. Dante looked at me. The mask dropped completely. There was no more fake sympathy, no more soft voice. He looked at me with pure contempt. Thanks, Dad, he said, sneering. You finally did something right. He turned to Tiffany. Get the champagne he ordered. The real stuff. And call the realtor. Tell him he can put the sign in the yard today. I sat there in the chair, clutching my hands to stop them from shaking. You promised, I whispered. You said you wouldn't sell the house. Dante threw his head back and laughed. It was a sound I will never forget. It was a maniacal, ugly sound that echoed off the high ceilings. Oh, grow up, old man, he said. Nobody keeps promises to ghosts. This house is a teardown. The land is worth more than the bricks. We are bulldozing this dump next week. He leaned in close to my face. And as for you, don't get too comfortable. The facility in the country, it is actually a state-run home. It is cheap, it smells like urine, and it is exactly where you belong. We are not wasting our inheritance on luxury care for a vegetable. Tiffany walked in with the bottle. She didn't even bring a glass for me. Cheers, she yelled, popping the cork. Cheers to us, Dante roared, raising the document in the air. To the new owners of Miller's Gold, I watched them toast. I watched them dance around the room. I watched Mr. Thorne smirk and check his watch. They were celebrating their victory. They didn't know they were celebrating their own funeral. I stood up, slowly. Where are you going? Dante asked, not even looking at me. To my room, I said quietly. To pack. Yeah, you do that? Dante laughed. Pack light. You won't need much where you are going. I walked to the stairs. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see them anymore. I had what I needed. I had their confession. I had their lies. And I had the document signed with the kill switch. I walked into my room and closed the door. I walked over to the window and watched Mr. Thorne get into his expensive car. He was driving straight to the courthouse. He was going to file that paper. Good. Let him file it. Let him trigger the alarm. I sat down on my bed and pulled out my phone. I sent a text message to Saul. The eagle has landed. The signature is jagged. Proceed with phase 2. I put the phone down. I could hear them downstairs. They were blasting music now. They were probably dancing on my furniture. Laugh while you can, son, I thought, because tomorrow the music stops, and when it stops you are going to find out that the chair you are sitting on has no legs. The ink on the paper was not even dry before the mask fell off. I have seen buildings collapse in slow motion before. I have seen walls crumble when the foundation gives way. But I have never seen a transformation as fast or as ugly as the one that happened in my dining room the moment Mr. Thorne closed the front door. Tiffany was the first to change. The sweet, concerned daughter-in-law, who had just promised to light candles for my late wife, vanished. In her place stood a woman with eyes as cold as a cash register drawer. She turned to me and she did not smile. She looked at me like I was a stain on the carpet that she had finally found the right chemical to remove. She clapped her hands together, a sharp, stinging sound that echoed in the silent room. "All right," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "The show is over. Gus, get upstairs and start packing." I sat there blinking, playing the part of the confused old man for just a few minutes longer. I wanted to see how deep the rot went. "Packing?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Packing for what?" "For your new home," Tiffany said. She walked over to the window and ripped the curtains open, letting the harsh sunlight flood the room. "We found a place for you. It is called Pine Creek. It is state-funded, so we don't have to waste the family trust on your care. It is a bit crowded. You will have 3 roommates in a 12 by 12 room. But honestly, for someone in your mental state, you won't even notice." Pine Creek. I knew that place. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. A place where the air smelled of bleach and despair, and the staff were underpaid and overworked. She was sending me to a graveyard with a waiting room. You said I could stay here," I whispered. "You promised, Dante. You promised your mother's house." Dante was busy at the liquor cabinet. He had cracked open the vintage champagne, the bottle I had been saving for Leo's 21st birthday. He poured 2 glasses, letting the foam spill over onto the mahogany surface without caring. He turned around. His face was flushed with adrenaline and greed. He took a long swig of the wine and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Promises are for people who matter, Dad," he said. "And right now you are just a liability, a line item on a spreadsheet that we just deleted." He walked over to Tiffany and handed her a glass. They clinked them together right in front of my face. "To the penthouse," Tiffany said, taking a sip, "and to getting this place fumigated. It smells like old people and cheap spices in here. I want everything gone, Dante. The furniture, the pictures, especially that hideous urn on the mantel. Throw it all in the dumpster." My hands clenched on my knees. She was talking about Bessie. She was talking about throwing my wife's ashes in the trash. It took every ounce of discipline I had not to stand up and break that champagne bottle over the table. But I waited. I had to wait. The trap was set, but the jaws hadn't snapped shut yet. Dante pulled out his phone. He didn't even leave the room. He dialed a number and put it on speakerphone so I could hear everything, so I could hear my legacy being butchered. "Hello," a voice answered. It was the vice president of Global Foods. "Mr. Sterling, it is Dante Miller. Dante, did you get the signature?" Dante grinned at me. A predatory grin. "I am holding it in my hand right now. Total power of attorney." The old man signed everything over. "I have full authority to liquidate." "Excellent," the voice on the phone said. "And the recipe?" "The secret formula for the gold sauce." Dante laughed. "I have the safe combination. I am opening it within the hour. You will have the formula by lunch." "When can we sign the acquisition deal? I have the papers ready on my desk," the voice said. 15 million, cash. But remember our condition, Dante. We don't want the baggage. The factory closes on Monday. All staff terminated immediately. We want a clean slate." "Consider it done," Dante said. "I will drive down there this afternoon and fire them myself. I will put a padlock on the gate. Those losers can go find another job." "Excellent. Send over the scan of the power of attorney and we will wire the deposit." Dante hung up. He looked at me. He looked like a man who had just conquered the world. "Did you hear that, Dad?" he asked. $15 million, and all it cost was a signature from a senile old man. He walked over to me. He leaned down, his breath smelling of my champagne. "You built a lemonade stand, Dad. I just turned it into an empire. You should be thanking me. Instead of leaving you to rot in this big empty house, I am setting you free." Tiffany walked over and stood next to him. "You have 2 days, Gus," she said. The transport van comes on Sunday morning. 2 plastic bags. That is the limit. No furniture, no photos, just clothes. If you are not ready, I will have the orderlies drag you out in your pajamas." She looked around the room. "God, I cannot wait to tear this place down. We are going to build something modern. Something that screams money. Not this brick-and-mortar relic." I looked at them. I looked at the 2 people who were supposed to be my family. I looked at the son I had held in my arms and the woman he had chosen to marry. And I realized that I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The sadness was gone. All that was left was a cold, hard clarity. They were not my family. They were parasites. And you don't negotiate with parasites. You exterminate them. I stopped shaking. I let my jaw set. I straightened my back. The slouch of the defeated old man vanished. I placed my hands on the armrests of the chair and pushed myself up. I stood to my full height, 6'2", broad shoulders, the posture of a man who has carried tons of bricks and never broken. Dante blinked. He took a half step back. He noticed the change. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Sit down before you fall over." I didn't sit down. I walked over to the table. I moved with a steady, purposeful stride. I picked up the glass of water I had requested earlier. I took a sip. Then I looked at the grandfather clock in the hallway. It was 10:15. I looked at my watch, a sturdy Timex that had survived construction sites and boardrooms. 10:15, I said aloud. My voice was deep and resonant. No tremors, no stutter. "What are you babbling about?" Tiffany snapped. I turned to face them. I looked them dead in the eye. "I am checking the time," I said, "because I want to remember exactly when you 2 lost everything." Dante laughed nervously. "Lost everything, Dad, you are hallucinating again. We just won. We have the papers, we have the money, you have nothing." I walked over to the window. I looked out at the long driveway lined with the oak trees I had planted. "You have a piece of paper, Dante," I said without turning around. "A piece of paper that I signed with a duress signature." The room went quiet. "What did you say?" Dante asked. I turned back to them. "A duress signature," I repeated. "It is a security measure. When the bank scans that document which your lawyer is filing right now, their system is going to flag the jagged loop on the S. It triggers an automatic fraud alert. It freezes every account associated with my name. It voids the document immediately." Tiffany's face went pale. "That is a lie. You are making that up." "Am I?" I asked. "Go ahead. Check your phone. Try to access the company accounts. Try to transfer the 15 million. Dante scrambled for his phone. His fingers were shaking so hard he dropped it once. He picked it up and tapped furiously on the screen. I watched the color drain from his face. "Access. Denied," he whispered. "Account locked. Contact administrator." He looked up at me. His eyes were wide with panic. "What did you do?" he screamed. "What did you do, you crazy old man?" "I didn't do anything," I said calmly. "You did it. You tried to steal from a man who checks the weather before he pours concrete. You thought I was asleep. You thought I was stupid. I have been awake for every second of this charade. I heard you talking to the realtor. I saw you put the pills in my soup." "Tiffany." Tiffany gasped. She covered her mouth. "I have cameras in the kitchen," I said. "I have audio recorders in the study. I have a toxicology report from the soup you tried to feed me. And I have a sworn statement from a neurologist dated yesterday certifying that I am of sound mind and body." I took a step toward them. They shrank back like children caught with matches. "You didn't sign a power of attorney, Dante. You signed a confession. Mr. Thorne just walked into the courthouse and handed the judge proof of your attempted grand larceny." Dante looked at the champagne bottle in his hand. He looked like he wanted to throw up. "No," he stammered. "No, this can't be real. We are family. You wouldn't do this to your own son." "My son died 10 years ago," I said, cold as ice. "You are just a thief who shares his last name. And you, Tiffany, you wanted to sanitize the room. You wanted to get rid of the trash." I pointed to the door. "Well, get ready, because the garbage truck is here." At that exact moment, the sound cut through the air. Wail, wail. It started soft, then grew louder. The distinct piercing cry of sirens, not 1, not 2, but 3. Dante ran to the window. Is that the ambulance?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Did you call the ambulance for yourself?" I laughed, a dry, humorless chuckle. "No, Dante. That is not an ambulance. That is the Fulton County Police Department, and they are not here for me." Blue lights flashed against the living room walls. The screech of tires on gravel tore through the morning silence. Doors slammed. Voices shouted commands. Dante backed away from the window. "Dad, please," he begged. Tears were streaming down his face now. "Please stop them. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. We were just trying to help. We can fix this. I won't sell the company." I promise. I looked at him. I looked at the fear in his eyes. It was the same fear he had when he owed money to the loan sharks. I had saved him then. I had sold my house to save him. But a man only burns his house down once. I walked over to the mantel. I picked up the urn that Tiffany had wanted to throw in the dumpster. I dusted it off gently. "You are right, Dante," I said softly. "You won't sell the company. Because you are going to be very busy for the next 10 to 15 years making license plates." Tiffany started screaming. She ran to the back door trying to escape, but I had locked the perimeter gates from my phone before I even stood up. There was nowhere to run. The front door burst open. Police. Everybody down. Officers in tactical gear flooded the foyer. I stood still, holding Bessie's urn. I watched as they tackled Dante to the ground. I watched as they handcuffed Tiffany, who was kicking and screaming profanities that would make a sailor blush. Mr. Miller, an officer, shouted, pointing a gun at me. "Put your hands up." I slowly raised my free hand. "It is okay, officer," I said calmly. "I am the victim. The evidence is on the table." Dante lifted his head from the floor. His face was pressed against the rug he had mocked earlier. "Dad," he screamed. "Dad, don't let them take me. I am your son." I looked down at him. "I don't have a son," I said. "My son is dead." I turned my back on them and walked toward the officer, my head held high. The performance was over. The critics were in handcuffs. And it was finally time to clean my house. The chaos in the living room was a symphony I had orchestrated, but the finale was yet to come. Dante was on his knees, his face pressed against the Persian rug he had planned to throw in the dumpster. Tiffany was screeching like a banshee as an officer adjusted the cuffs on her wrists. But even in this position, even with a Glock pointed at him, Dante still thought he held the ace of spades. He struggled against the officer's grip, twisting his body so he could reach into his pocket. "You are making a mistake," he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "Get your hands off me. I am the legal guardian of this estate. I am the owner of this house." He managed to pull out the crumpled document, the ink still fresh from my jagged signature. He waved it in the air like a flag. "Look at this," he yelled. "Look at the signature. My father signed everything over to me 10 minutes ago. I have power of attorney. I have the right to evict him. I have the right to sell this company. You work for me now." The officer looked at the paper, then at me. He didn't let go of Dante. That is when the front door opened again. It wasn't more police. It was a man in a tweed suit walking with a cane and a smile that could cut glass. Saul, my lawyer, my friend, and the sharpest legal mind in Atlanta, walked into the room. He stepped over a broken vase without looking down. He walked right up to Dante, who was still waving the paper. Saul adjusted his glasses and peered down at my son. "Hello, Dante," Saul said pleasantly. "It has been a long time. You look comfortable down there." Dante's eyes widened. He knew Saul. He knew Saul was the one man who had always seen through his lies. Saul Dante spat. "Tell them, tell these idiots who I am. I have the power of attorney. It is legal." Dad signed it. Saul reached down and plucked the paper from Dante's hand. He held it up to the light, pretending to examine it. "Ah, yes," Saul said. "I see Gus's signature here. A bit messy, but legible enough. And yes, this document does indeed transfer all of Augustus Miller's personal assets and decision-making powers to you." Dante laughed, a hysterical, broken sound. "See?" he shouted at the police. "I told you. Now get off me and arrest this old man for filing a false police report. I own everything. I own the company." Saul tutted softly. He shook his head with mock sadness. "Well, that is where you are confused, Dante. You see, this document transfers what Gus owns, but you made a very critical error in your due diligence. You assumed Gus owned Miller's gold." Dante stopped struggling. The room went deadly silent. Even Tiffany stopped screaming to listen. "What are you talking about?" Dante whispered. "Of course he owns it. He built it. He is the CEO. Saul reached into his own briefcase. He pulled out a leather-bound binder. It was old. The leather was cracked and worn. He opened it and turned it toward Dante so he could read the bold text on the first page. 5 years ago, Saul began, his voice turning into a lecture. Right around the time you decided to pawn your father's truck to pay for a gambling debt, Gus and I had a very long meeting. We decided that the company was becoming too valuable to be left vulnerable to, how shall I put this, external predators. Saul tapped the page. So on July 4th, 2019, Augustus Miller transferred 100% of the equity, intellectual property, and assets of Miller's Gold LLC into the Miller Heritage Trust. Dante blinked. So what, I am the heir. The trust comes to me anyway. Saul laughed. It was a dry, dusty laugh. No, Dante. You really should read more. This is an irrevocable trust. Do you know what irrevocable means? It means it cannot be changed. It cannot be undone. And most importantly, it means Gus doesn't own the company anymore. The trust owns it. Gus is merely an employee. Saul looked at me and winked. What is your salary again, Mr. Miller? I stepped forward, looking down at my son. $1 a year, I said, plus benefits. Saul nodded. Exactly. So when Gus signed that paper giving you control of his assets, he gave you control of his checking account, which currently has about $500 in it. He gave you his wardrobe, which you hate, and he gave you his collection of jazz records. Saul closed the binder with a loud snap. But the company, the factory, the $15 million deal with Global Foods. You can't sell any of it, Dante, because Gus doesn't own it. You can't sell a house you are just renting, and Gus can't give you what he doesn't have. Dante's face went gray. It was the color of old ash. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. No, he stammered. No, that is a lie. Who is the beneficiary? If it is a trust, someone has to get the money. It has to be family. I am his only son. He looked at me with pleading eyes. Dad, tell him. Tell him I am the beneficiary. Even if it isn't a trust, I am the one who gets it right. I crouched down so I was eye level with him. I wanted him to see the truth in my eyes. I thought about it, Dante, I said softly. 5 years ago, I really thought about it. I sat up for nights wondering if you would change, if you would grow up. But then I remembered the way you treated the waitress at the diner. I remembered how you lied about the gambling, and I realized that giving you money was like giving a machine gun to a monkey. I stood up and looked at Saul. Read him the beneficiary clause, Saul. Saul put on his reading glasses. The primary beneficiaries of the Miller Heritage Trust are as follows. 50% of all annual profits are directed to the United Negro College Fund and the Atlanta Youth Trade School Program to provide scholarships for underprivileged children. Tiffany let out a gasp. She looked physically ill. Millions of dollars going to charity instead of her pockets. And the other 50%, Dante asked, his voice barely a whisper. Saul turned the page. The remaining 50% is to be reinvested into the company until such time as the secondary beneficiary reaches the age of 25. At that time, if said beneficiary demonstrates good character and a willingness to work, he will assume the role of chairman. Who? Dante screamed. Who is it? Saul smiled. Leo Miller. Dante collapsed. He didn't faint, he just gave up. His arms went limp. His head hit the carpet. Leo, he whispered. My son. Your son, I corrected him. The boy you were going to ship off to a boarding school so you wouldn't have to deal with him. The boy you used as a shield. He owns the company, Dante, not you. And since he is a minor, the trust is managed by a board of directors. I pointed to myself. And guess who the head of the board is? Mr. Dante looked up at me. The realization hit him like a freight train. The deal with Global Foods was dead. The cash payout was a fantasy. He had committed fraud, attempted murder, and elder abuse for absolutely nothing. You set me up, Dante whispered. You knew. You knew the whole time, and you let me call them. You let me make a fool of myself. I didn't set you up, Dante, I said. I just let you be yourself. You dug the hole. I just bought the shovel. Tiffany started crying. It wasn't a sad cry. It was an angry, ugly sobbing. You can't do this, she screamed at me. We have rights. We are his parents. If Leo is rich, then we control the money. We are his legal guardians. Saul stepped toward her. Actually, Mrs. Miller, that brings us to the second part of why the police are here. You see, the trust has a very specific clause regarding the guardianship of the beneficiary. If the biological parents are found to be, let's say, criminally negligent or incarcerated, the board assumes temporary custody. Incarcerated. Tiffany choked out. Saul nodded toward the police officer holding her. Attempted poisoning is a felony, Mrs. Miller. So is elder abuse, and I believe the district attorney is very interested in the perjury your husband committed on the guardianship application. You aren't going to be controlling anyone's money where you are going. Tiffany looked at the officer, then at Dante, then at the door. The reality of prison finally pierced her bubble of delusion. Dante, tell them, she shrieked. Tell them it was your idea, I didn't want to do it. You made me. Dante looked at his wife, the woman who had whispered poison in his ear for 10 years. Shut up, Tiffany, he groaned. Just shut up. The police captain stepped forward. Mr. Miller, are you ready for us to transport them, he asked me. I looked at the wreckage of my family. I looked at the son I had loved and the strangers they had become. Get them out of my house, I said. The officers hauled them up. Dante couldn't even walk. They had to drag him. His feet dragged across the hardwood floor, leaving scuff marks. He didn't look at me as he passed. He looked at the ground, muttering to himself about $15 million. Tiffany fought all the way to the door, kicking and screaming about her rights, about how unfair it was, about how she was the victim. When the door finally closed and the silence returned to the house, I felt a wave of exhaustion hit me. I leaned against the table. Saul put a hand on my shoulder. You okay, Gus? He asked. I looked at the empty spot on the rug where Dante had been lying. I just fired my son, Saul, I said. And I just made my grandson a millionaire. It is a hell of a morning. Saul closed his briefcase. You saved the company, Gus. And you saved Leo. Dante made his choice a long time ago. I nodded. I knew he was right. But it still hurt. It hurt in a place that medicine can't touch. I have one more thing to do, I said. What is that? Saul asked. I need to go to the kitchen, I said. The kitchen? Yes. I need to get the video files from the cameras, and then I need to make Leo some lunch. When he gets back from the neighbors, he is going to have a lot of questions, and I need to tell him that his parents are going away for a long time. I walked toward the kitchen, passing the spot where I had signed the paper. The pen was still on the floor. I kicked it under the table. $1 a year, I whispered to myself. And it is the best job I ever had. You would think that hearing about the loss of a $15 million company would be enough to silence a person. You would think that realizing your husband is broke and your son is a secret millionaire would be enough to make a woman sit down and shut up. But you do not know Tiffany. Greed is not just a habit for her. It is a survival instinct. It is the air in her lungs. And when you cut off her oxygen, she does not suffocate. She screams. The company, she shrieked, her voice bouncing off the high ceilings like a ricocheting bullet. Fine, keep the damn company, keep your sauce and your factory and your charity cases, I don't care. She spun around wild-eyed, pointing a shaking finger at the floor beneath her feet. But this house, she yelled. This house is residential property. It is not part of the company trust. I checked the public records. The deed is in the name of Augustus Miller. She turned to the police officer who was holding her arm and tried to shake him off. Let go of me. My husband is the legal guardian of Augustus Miller. We have the paper. He signed it. That means we control his personal assets. We control this house. And I am telling you right now, as the lady of the house, I want this man removed. She pointed at me. He is trespassing in my home. Get him out. Dante lifted his head from the carpet. A glimmer of hope returned to his eyes. He saw a lifeboat in the middle of the ocean. She is right, he wheezed. The house, Dad. The house is personal property. You signed the power of attorney. That paper gives me the deed. We can still sell it. We can still get 3, maybe 4 million for the land. He looked at Saul. You can't trust fund a house that is already mortgaged under a personal name, Saul. I know the law. I looked at them. I looked at the desperation. It was pathetic. It was the last gasp of a dying fire. I decided it was time to put out the flame for good. I stepped away from the table. I didn't shuffle. I didn't hold on to the chair for support. I stood up straight, my spine snapping into alignment like a steel rod. I rolled my neck, cracking the stiffness away. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs completely. The frail, confused old man they had bullied for days evaporated in a second. In his place stood Gus Miller, the man who laid the foundation of this house with his own hands. Dante watched me transform. His jaw dropped. "Dad," he whispered, you are walking fine." "I am doing more than walking, Dante," I said, my voice booming in the room. "I am ending this." I walked over to the wall-mounted television in the living room. I moved with the speed and precision of a man half my age. I picked up the remote. "You say you have a paper, Tiffany?" I said, pointing the remote at the screen. "You say you have a signature that gives you my life." "Yes," she hissed. "And it is legal." I pressed the power button. The 60-inch screen flared to life. "In the state of Georgia," I said, my voice calm and instructional like a teacher addressing a slow class, "a contract is void if it is signed under duress. Do you know what duress means?" "Tiffany, it means you forced me," she spat. "But we didn't force you. You signed it willingly. We were all witnesses." I pressed the cast button on my phone, sending the video file from the hidden camera directly to the TV. "Duress isn't just a gun to the head," I said. "Sometimes it is a chemical weapon." The video started playing. It was clear as day. It showed the kitchen from yesterday afternoon. It showed Tiffany standing at the counter. It showed the orange pill bottle. It showed the mortar and pestle. The room went deadly silent. The only sound was the audio from the TV. Tiffany's voice humming a cheerful tune as she crushed the Xanax. The police officer holding Tiffany tightened his grip. He leaned in closer to the screen. Is that narcotics?" the officer asked. I paused the video right at the moment Tiffany dumped the white powder into my tomato bisque. "That," I said, pointing to the screen, "is 4 milligrams of alprazolam and 10 milligrams of zolpidem, enough to knock out a horse. Or to make an old man so confused he would sign his own death warrant." Tiffany went pale. Her knees buckled, but the officer held her up. That is out of context," she stammered. I was adding vitamins, calcium. It was calcium powder." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Really?" I asked. "Because I didn't eat the soup, Tiffany. But I did send a sample to the lab. And just to be sure, I went to the hospital this morning before the meeting. I unfolded the paper and held it up. This is a toxicology report from my blood drawn at 8 a.m. today. It shows 0 traces of vitamins, but it does show a significant level of adrenaline. And this paper. This is the lab report on the soup. It confirms the presence of Schedule 4 controlled substances." I looked at Saul. "Saul, what happens to a legal document when one party has been actively poisoned by the beneficiary?" Saul smiled. It was a shark's smile. "Fruit of the poisonous tree," he said. "The document is void ab initio. From the beginning, it is worth less than the toilet paper you use to wipe your conscience, Tiffany." Dante groaned. He rolled onto his back, staring at the ceiling. "So that is it," he whispered. "We don't get the company. We don't get the power of attorney, but the house is still yours, Dad. You still own it. And I am your son. You aren't going to let us be homeless, right? We can still live here. We can start over." He looked at me with those puppy dog eyes that used to work when he was 12. "We can be a family again, Dad. Just you and me and Tiffany and Leo. In this big house. We will be better, I promise." I laughed. I couldn't help it. The audacity was truly impressive. "You think you can live here?" I asked. "Yes," Dante said, sitting up. "It is your house. You can decide." I shook my head. I walked over to the window and looked out at the sprawling lawn, the fountain, the rose bushes. "That is the funny thing about this house, Dante. You see, when you get to be my age, you learn that owning things is a liability. Liability attracts lawsuits. Liability attracts greedy relatives." I turned back to them. "I don't own this house." Tiffany blinked. "What?" I checked the deed. "It says Augustus Miller. Read the fine print," I said. Saul stepped forward, opening his briefcase again. He pulled out a property deed, Mrs. "Miller is partially correct," Saul said. "The deed lists Augustus Miller as the trustee, but the actual owner of the property," he turned the document around, "is the Miller's Gold Corporate Retreat and Conference Center, LLC, a wholly owned subsidiary of the Miller Heritage Trust." I walked over to Dante and looked down at him. You wanted to sell the house, I said. You wanted to tear it down. But you can't, because this isn't a house, Dante. This is a commercial facility. It is a tax write-off. It is a place for company retreats and board meetings. But you live here, Tiffany stammered. You sleep here, I smiled. I do. And do you know why I pulled my wallet out of my back pocket? I extracted a laminated ID card. I clipped it to my shirt pocket. It was a standard employee ID badge. It had my picture on it, and under my name it listed my job title, Head of Security and Groundskeeping. I tapped the badge. I am the caretaker Tiffany. I am the help. I pay rent to the company out of my $1 a year salary. My job is to protect the asset, to make sure the lawn is mowed, the pipes don't freeze, and the vermin stay out. I looked at the police officer. And speaking of vermin, officer, I believe these two individuals are trespassing on commercial property. They are disrupting the operations of a business. And as the head of security, I am formally requesting their removal. Dante stared at the badge. He stared at the man he thought was a senile fool. He finally realized the depth of the game I had been playing. I hadn't just hidden the money, I had hidden the entire world from him. You are just the janitor, he whispered. You live in a $6 million mansion and you are the janitor. I am the man who holds the keys, I said. And that is all that matters. Tiffany let out a long, low wail of despair. It was the sound of a woman watching her last hope circle the drain. This isn't fair, she screamed. You tricked us. You made us think you were vulnerable. I didn't trick you, I said, cold and hard. I tested you. I gave you a roof over your head. I gave you food. I gave you a chance to be family. And you tried to drug me. You tried to rob me. You tried to erase my wife's memory. I walked over to the front door and opened it wide. The test is over. You failed. The police captain nodded to his men. All right, let's go. You have the right to remain silent. They hauled them toward the door. Dante was weeping openly now. Tiffany was spitting curses. Wait! Dante yelled, digging his heels into the rug. Wait! What about Leo? You can't keep my son. He is mine. I stood in the doorway, blocking the sun. Leo is currently at a private school for the gifted, I said. I enrolled him this morning. The trust pays the tuition. And considering you are both about to be arraigned for multiple felonies, I don't think Child Protective Services is going to let you within 500 feet of him. I looked at Dante one last time. He is safe, Dante. He is going to grow up learning how to build things, not how to steal them. The officers dragged them out. I watched as they were shoved into the back of two separate squad cars. The neighbors were out on their lawns watching the spectacle. I saw Mrs. Higgins from down the street watching with her hand over her mouth. I waved at her. Just a casual wave, like I was getting the morning paper. The sirens wailed as the cars pulled away. I stood there on the porch of the house I didn't own, watching the people I didn't know disappear. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Saul. Head of security, huh? Saul chuckled. You really committed to the bit, Gus. I unclipped the badge and looked at it. It is an honest job, Saul. Someone has to keep the weeds out of the garden. I turned and walked back inside. The house was quiet. The negative energy was gone. The air felt lighter. I walked to the kitchen and saw the pot of poisoned soup still sitting on the stove. I picked it up. I walked to the sink and poured it down the drain. I turned on the garbage disposal and listened to it grind away the last remnants of their betrayal. I washed the pot. I dried it. Then I opened the fridge. I took out a package of hot dogs. Leo would be home in an hour, and we had a victory to celebrate. I am going to fire up the grill. Saul, I yelled toward the living room. You want a burger? Saul appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie. Only if you use the special sauce, Gus. I smiled. The first real, genuine smile in 10 years. Always Saul. It is the only thing that separates us from the animals. I took the bottle of Miller's Gold from the pantry. It caught the light. It looked like liquid sunshine. I had lost a son today, but I had saved a legacy. And looking at that bottle, I knew I had made the right trade. You might think that stripping a man of his inheritance and kicking him out of a mansion is the end of the story. In most families it would be. You take back the keys, you change the locks, and you let time heal the wounds. But Dante and Tiffany did not just break my heart, they broke the law. And I'm a man who believes that while forgiveness is the Lord's business, justice is the duty of every citizen. The silence in the room was heavy. Dante was staring at my employee badge like it was a holy relic that burned his eyes. Tiffany was slumped against the wall looking like a balloon that had lost all its air. They thought they were just being evicted. They thought the worst thing that was going to happen was a humiliating Uber ride to a motel. But I wasn't done. I looked at the police captain. His name is Captain Reynolds. He has known me for 20 years. We play dominoes on Tuesdays. He knows I don't call 911 unless the building is on fire or a crime has been committed. "Captain," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet, "I believe you have some paperwork of your own to read to these individuals." Captain Reynolds stepped forward. He is a big man with a voice like gravel. He didn't look at Dante with pity. He looked at him like he was looking at a cockroach. "Dante Miller and Tiffany Miller," he said, pulling a folded warrant from his vest. "You are currently under arrest." Dante scrambled to his feet. "Arrest!" he squeaked. "For what? Trespassing fine. We are leaving. You can't arrest us for staying in my father's house." The captain shook his head slowly. "It is not just trespassing, son, though we will get to that." He unfolded the paper. "Let's start with the most serious count. Attempted aggravated battery with a poisonous substance." Tiffany let out a strangulated cry. "I told you," she screamed. "It was vitamins." "You can't prove intent." The captain motioned to one of his officers who was holding an evidence bag. Inside was the toxicology report from my blood and the lab results from the soup. "We have the video, Mrs. Miller," the captain said calmly. "We have the audio of you discussing the dosage. We have the video of your husband agreeing to it. And we have the lab results matching the residue in the pot to the prescription bottle found in your purse. In the state of Georgia, poisoning a person over the age of 65 is not just assault, it is a special felony class. Elder abuse with intent to cause bodily harm, mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines apply." Dante started to hyperventilate. "I didn't put it in the soup." He gasped, pointing a trembling finger at his wife. "She did. I just watched. I didn't touch the pills." I looked at him. My son, throwing his wife under the bus to save his own skin. It was pathetic, but it was exactly what I expected. Accessory before and after the fact. The captain said, noting Dante's confession, "That carries the same penalty, Dante. You watched her do it. You encouraged it, and you planned to benefit from the victim's incapacitation. That makes you a co-conspirator." Dante fell to his knees again, but he didn't drink it, he pleaded, looking at me. "Dad, you are fine. You look great. No harm done, right? No harm, no foul." I stepped closer to him. "No harm." I asked, my voice low and dangerous. "You tried to turn my brain into mush so you could steal my life's work. Just because I was smart enough not to swallow your poison doesn't mean you didn't try to kill the man I am." The captain cleared his throat. "And then there is the matter of the house." He turned to the second page of the warrant. "You are being charged with criminal trespass and burglary." Tiffany scoffed. She was trying to regain her composure, trying to find a loophole. "You can't burglarize a house you were invited into," she spat. "He let us in. We have witnesses." I reached into my breast pocket. I pulled out the folded piece of yellow legal paper. The one I had made them sign in the foyer on the very first day. The one Tiffany had laughed at. The one she said was trash. I unfolded it carefully. "Do you remember this, Tiffany?" I asked. She stared at the paper. Her eyes went wide. "The guest agreement," I said, reading from the text. Clause number 4. The guests agree that any engagement in illegal activity or any act of hostility toward the host immediately revokes their permission to be on the premises. Furthermore, clause number 5 states that upon revocation of permission, any continued presence on the property shall be considered a criminal act of trespassing. I looked up at her. "You signed this, Tiffany. You signed it right there. And the moment you crushed those pills into my soup, you broke the contract. For the last 24 hours, you haven't been guests. You have been intruders." The captain nodded. "And since you entered the private office, which was explicitly marked as off-limits, and broke into a locked desk that elevates the charge to burglary in the second degree." Dante looked like he was going to be sick. The walls were closing in on him. Every lie he had told, every corner he had cut was turning into a bar in his prison cell. "But wait," I said, raising my hand. "We are forgetting the cherry on top." I looked at Dante. I looked at the man who thought he was a business genius. "The phone call," I said. Dante blinked, sweat dripping down his nose. What phone call? The one you made 10 minutes ago, I said. To Global Foods. To Mr. Sterling. Dante's face went white. You put it on speakerphone, Dante. You bragged about it. You told him you had the safe combination. You told him you were going to send him the formula for Miller's Gold Sauce by lunch. I turned to the captain. Captain, do you know what the recipe for Miller's Gold is classified as under state and federal law? The captain smiled. Intellectual property, he said. A trade secret. Exactly, I said. I walked over to the table where Dante's phone was still sitting. Attempting to sell a trade secret to a competitor without the owner's permission is called industrial espionage. It is a federal crime, Dante. The FBI takes a very dim view of corporate theft, especially when the value of the trade secret is estimated at over $15 million. Dante shook his head violently. I didn't send it, he cried. I didn't send anything. I don't even know the combination. I was bluffing. It doesn't matter, I said. You solicited the sale. You entered into a verbal contract to sell stolen property. You admitted on a recorded line that you intended to steal the formula from my safe and transfer it to a third party for personal gain. I looked at Saul. Saul, did we get that recording? Saul tapped his hearing aid, which I knew was actually a high-tech earpiece connected to the room's audio system. Crystal clear, Gus. The district attorney is going to love it. It is the trifecta. State charges for the poison, local charges for the house, federal charges for the business. Dante looked at the floor. He realized the scope of what was happening. He wasn't just going to jail for a few months. He was looking at 20 years, minimum. He started to crawl toward me. He actually crawled on his hands and knees, grabbing at my pant leg. Dad, stop this, he sobbed. Please. I am your son. I made a mistake. I am sorry. I will go to rehab. I will do anything. Just tell them to stop. You can't send me to prison. I won't survive in there. I am not like you. I am not tough. I looked down at him. I felt a pang of pity. Not love. Pity. He was right. He wasn't like me. He was soft. He was entitled. And he was a coward. I kicked his hand off my leg. You should have thought about that before you tried to sell my legacy for a ski trip to Aspen, I said. I looked at the captain. Get them out of here, Captain. They are dirtying my floors. The captain signaled his men. Cuff them. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was loud in the silent room. Click, 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 click. Tiffany started screaming again. This is a setup. You entrapped us. I want a lawyer. I want my phone. You will get a phone call at the station, ma'am, the officer said, dragging her toward the door. I suggest you use it to call a bail bondsman. Though with these charges, I doubt you will be getting out anytime soon. Dante didn't scream. He went limp. 2 officers had to drag him out by his armpits. His expensive Italian loafers dragged across the threshold, leaving black scuff marks on the wood. As they reached the door, Dante looked back at me one last time. His eyes were red, his face swollen. Why, he whispered. Why did you let it go this far? You could have just said no. I looked at him. I did say no. Dante, I said no. 10 years ago. I said no when you asked for money. I said no when you asked for the house. But you didn't listen. You never listened. You thought no meant negotiate. You needed to learn that some lines are made of concrete. You can't cross them. You can only break yourself against them. The door slammed shut. The sirens wailed again, louder this time, as they pulled away, carrying the wreckage of my family down the long driveway. I stood there in the center of the room. The silence rushed back in. It was a heavy silence, but it was clean. The poison was gone. I looked at Saul. He was putting his papers back into his briefcase. That was thorough, Saul said. It was necessary, I replied. I walked over to the window and watched the police cars disappear around the bend. Industrial espionage, Saul mused. That was a nice touch. I didn't know if you were going to pull that card. I turned to him. My father spent 50 years perfecting that sauce, Saul. He wrote the recipe on the back of a Bible page. He gave it to me on his deathbed. He said, Gus, this is all I have to leave you. Protect it. I touched the badge on my chest. Dante tried to sell my father's soul for cash. Federal prison is a kindness compared to what my father would have done to him. I looked at the clock. It is almost noon. I need to go pick up Leo, I said. Saul looked concerned. What are you going to tell him, Gus? He is 8 years old. How do you tell a boy his parents are criminals? I walked to the kitchen and grabbed my keys. I am going to tell him the truth, Saul. I am going to tell him that his parents made some bad choices and they have to go away to learn how to be better people. And I'm going to tell him that while they are gone, he has a job to do. What job? Saul asked. I smiled. He is the new vice president of tasting, and we have a new batch to test. I walked out the door, leaving the empty house behind. The air outside was fresh. The sun was shining. I got into my old truck and turned the key. The engine roared to life. Strong, reliable, just like me. I drove down the driveway past the tire marks left by the police cars. I didn't look back. I looked forward, to the school, to the boy, to the future. The weeds were pulled. The garden was safe. Now it was time to help the last good flower grow. There is a saying we have in the construction business. You find out what a house is really made of when the storm hits. Some houses stand firm because they have a solid foundation and good bones. Others collapse because they were built on sand and shortcuts. And looking at the two people standing in my foyer as the handcuffs clicked shut, I saw the collapse of a structure built entirely on greed and lies. The moment the reality of the federal charges hit the air, the alliance between my son and his wife evaporated like water on hot pavement. It was ugly to watch. It was the frantic scratching of rats trying to climb over each other to escape a sinking ship. Tiffany was the first to break. The woman who had sworn to love and cherish my son, the woman who had whispered poison into his ear for a decade, suddenly looked at him like he was a stranger who had just mugged her. Her face twisted into a mask of pure panic. She wrenched her arm away from the officer and pointed a manicured finger directly at Dante. It was him, she screamed, her voice shrill and piercing. It was all his idea, officer. I swear, I didn't want to do any of this. He made me. Dante looked up from the floor where he was still on his knees. His mouth dropped open. What are you talking about, Tiff? He stammered. He is abusive, Tiffany yelled, cutting him off. She looked at the police captain, her eyes wide and pleading. He forced me to crush those pills. He said if I didn't help him get the money, he would leave me. He said he would take Leo, and I would never see my son again. I was scared. I was just a terrified wife doing what her husband told her to do. I only wanted to help Gus. I thought the medicine would just help him sleep. I didn't know Dante was trying to sell the company. I stood there leaning against the door frame watching her performance. It was Oscar-worthy. If I didn't have the video of her humming a happy tune while she mixed the poison, I might have even believed her. Dante stared at her. The betrayal hit him harder than the handcuffs. The woman he had destroyed his relationship with his father for, the woman he had committed felonies for, was now offering him up as a human sacrifice to save her own skin. You are lying, Dante whispered. His voice was broken. You are lying, Tiff. You planned it. You found the buyer. You found the pills. Tiffany turned on him, baring her teeth like a cornered animal. Shut up, Dante. You are the one with the gambling debts. You are the one who needed the cash. I have my own money. I come from a good family. Why would I need to steal from this old man? It was all you. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face now. Gus, please tell them. You know Dante. You know how he is. He has always been a disappointment. He dragged me into this. I am the victim here, Gus. Please don't let them take me to jail. Who will take care of Leo? She played the mother card, the last refuge of the scoundrel. I looked at her cold and unmoving. You stopped being a mother the minute you decided to make your son an orphan by killing his grandfather, I said. Tiffany let out a wail of despair as the officer tightened his grip on her arm. Get her out of here, the captain ordered. She is making my head hurt. As they dragged Tiffany toward the door, kicking and screaming about her rights, Dante finally broke. He didn't scream, he didn't fight, he just crumbled. He crawled across the hardwood floor, the expensive knees of his suit pants dragging on the ground until he was at my feet. He wrapped his arms around my legs. He buried his face in my boots. He wept. It was the ugly sobbing of a man who realizes he has thrown away the only life preserver he ever had. Dad, he choked out. Dad, please, look at me. I looked down. I saw the top of his head. I saw the thinning hair. I saw the boy I used to carry on my shoulders. I am sorry, he sobbed. I am so sorry. I messed up. I know I messed up, but I can fix it. I will testify against her. I will tell them everything she did. Just don't let them take me. Not federal prison, Dad. They will kill me in there. He looked up at me. His face was wet with snot and tears. His eyes were red and swollen. "I am your son," he whispered. "I am your flesh and blood. You can't do this to me. You can't send your own son to hell. Remember when I was little? Remember when you taught me to fish? You said you would always protect me. You promised." I felt a lump in my throat the size of a brick. My heart was breaking, not the sharp crack of a sudden break, but the slow, grinding, crushing weight of a tragedy 50 years in the making. I wanted to reach down. I wanted to pull him up and tell him it was going to be okay. That is the father's instinct. To protect, to forgive. But then I looked at the kitchen. I pictured the pot of soup. I pictured the phone call to the competitor. I pictured him laughing while he planned to bulldozing my wife's garden. Forgiveness is for mistakes. This was not a mistake. This was a calculation. I reached down. I put my hand on his head. For a second he stopped crying, thinking I was offering mercy. But I wasn't. I pushed him away. I stepped back, breaking his hold on my legs. Dante looked at me confused. "Dad." I took a deep breath. I let the air fill my lungs and steady my voice. When I spoke, it didn't sound like me. It sounded like iron striking an anvil. "I don't have a son," I said. Dante flinched as if I had slapped him. "What?" "My son died 10 years ago," I said, looking past him at the empty wall. "My son was a boy who had dreams. My son was a boy who knew right from wrong. My son was a boy who would have cut off his own hand before he stole from his family." I looked down at the sobbing man in the suit. "I don't know who you are, but you are wearing my son's face and you are using his name. Dad, don't say that," Dante begged, reaching for me again. "Don't touch me," I snapped. I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper that echoed in the silent room. "You want to talk about promises, Dante? I promised your mother I would keep this family safe. And for the last week I have been sleeping with a snake in my guest room. I let you in, I fed you, I gave you a chance. And you tried to bite the hand that fed you." I stood up straight, adjusting my jacket. "You are not my son," I said. "You are just trash, and I am finally cleaning my house." Dante's eyes went dead. The hope vanished. He realized finally that the well had run dry. There was no more money, no more second chances, no more bailouts. The captain stepped forward. "Get up, Dante," he said. Dante didn't move, so 2 officers grabbed him under the armpits and hauled him to his feet. He was dead weight, his legs dragged behind him. He looked at me one last time as they clamped the cuffs on his wrists. "I hate you," he whispered. I nodded. "I know," I said. "That is why you are leaving in a police car and I am staying in my home." I watched them drag him out. I watched my only child be loaded into the back of a cruiser. I watched the door slam shut. It was the heavy final sound of a coffin lid closing. As the cars pulled away, leaving tire tracks on my driveway, Saul walked up beside me. He didn't say anything. He just stood there. He knew there were no words for this kind of pain. But there was still one loose end, the most important one. The captain walked back up the steps. He took off his hat. "Gus," he said softly, "it is done. The district attorney is already drafting the paperwork. They won't be making bail." "Thank you, Jim," I said. My voice was hoarse. "There is a van coming up the drive," the captain said, pointing to the gate. "It is the Child Protective Services team." I nodded. This was the part I had dreaded the most, but also the part I had planned the most carefully. "I didn't want Leo to see this," I said. "I didn't want him to see his father in cuffs." "You did the right thing," Gus, the captain said. "The social worker knows the situation. She knows about the trust. She knows you have temporary custody pending the hearing." The van pulled up. A kind-looking woman in a blazer stepped out. She walked up to me and extended her hand. "Mr. Miller, I am Sarah Form, CPS." We spoke on the phone. I shook her hand. "Is he safe?" I asked. "He is fine," she said. "We picked him up from the school just like you asked. We told him his parents had a medical emergency and couldn't pick him up. He is playing with some toys in the van. He is a brave kid." I felt the tension leave my shoulders. "Does he know I asked?" "Not yet," she said. "We thought it would be best if it came from you." I looked at the empty house behind me. It felt too big, too quiet. "Can I bring him inside?" I asked. "Of course," she said. "You are the legal guardian, Mr. Miller. The paperwork is already signed." She went to the van and opened the door. Leo jumped out. He was wearing his school uniform and holding his backpack. When he saw me, his face lit up. "Grandpa!" he yelled, running toward me. I knelt down on the concrete. I didn't care about my knees. I opened my arms and caught him. He smelled like crayons and playground dust. He felt solid and real. "Hey, astronaut," I said, squeezing him tight. "Where are Mom and Dad?" he asked, looking around. "The lady said they were sick." I pulled back and looked at him. I looked into those eyes that were so much like Bessie's. I brushed the hair out of his face. "Come inside, Leo," I said. "I made us some lunch. We need to have a talk." "Are they okay?" he asked, his voice small. I stood up, holding his hand. It was small and warm in mine. "They're going to be away for a while, son," I said. "They did some things that grown-ups aren't supposed to do, and they have to go to a place where they can learn to be better." "Like a timeout?" Leo asked. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Yeah, Leo, like a very long time out." "But who is going to take care of me?" he asked. I squeezed his hand. "I am," I said, "and we are going to be okay." I led him up the steps. I looked at the captain and nodded. He tipped his hat and walked to his car. I looked at Saul. "You coming in, Saul?" I asked. Saul smiled. "I think I will let you two have a moment, Gus. I will handle the press." I walked into the house with my grandson. I closed the heavy mahogany door. The silence of the house wrapped around us, but this time it didn't feel lonely. It felt safe. I had lost a son today. That pain would never go away. But looking down at the boy holding my hand, I knew I hadn't lost everything. I had cut off the rot. I had saved the root. And now it was time to help the new branch grow toward the sun. "Hungry?" I asked. "Starving," Leo said. "Good," I said, walking toward the kitchen. "Because I make a mean grilled cheese, and after that we have a business to run. 3 months is 90 days. To a man living in a 6,000 square foot mansion with a heated pool, 90 days goes by like a snap of the fingers. You wake up, you drink your coffee, you watch the sun set, and before you know it, the season has changed. But to a man living in a 6 by 8 foot concrete box, 90 days is an eternity. It is enough time to count every crack in the ceiling. It is enough time to forget what fresh air smells like. And it is enough time to realize that the world does not stop spinning just because you are not part of it anymore." I drove my old Ford truck down the highway toward the state penitentiary. The landscape changed from the lush green suburbs of Atlanta to the flat gray industrial zones where they keep the things society does not want to see. Garbage dumps, sewer treatment plants, and prisons. I parked the truck in the visitor lot. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My knuckles were white. I have faced union strikes. I have faced bank foreclosures. I have faced the death of my wife. But walking into that building to see my only son wearing a number instead of a name was the hardest thing I have ever had to do. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I did not look like a man who had won. I looked like a father who had survived a war but lost the soldier he loved the most. I put on my hat. I took a deep breath of the free air, and I walked toward the razor wire. The process of entering a prison is designed to strip you of your dignity. You take off your belt, you take off your shoes, you empty your pockets, you walk through scanners that buzz and beep. The guards do not smile. They look at you like you are just another complication in their long shift. I sat in the visitation room. It smelled of industrial pine cleaner and old sweat. There were other families there, wives crying into tissues, toddlers banging on the glass, mothers looking at their sons with eyes that had run out of tears years ago. I sat at table number 4. My hands were folded on the cold metal surface. Then the door on the other side buzzed. Dante walked in. If I had passed him on the street, I might not have recognized him. The Dante of 3 months ago was soft. He had the complexion of a man who spent his days in spas and his nights in wine bars. He was plump with entitlement. The man who walked toward me was a ghost. He had lost 30 pounds. His skin was sallow and gray. His hair, which he used to style with expensive gels, was shaved close to his scalp, exposing the shape of his skull. He walked with a shuffle, his eyes darting around the room like a frightened animal. He wore a bright orange jumpsuit that hung off his frame like a sack. He sat down opposite me. He did not look me in the eye. He looked at my hands. "Hello, Dante," I said. He flinched at the sound of his name. He looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. "You came," he whispered. His voice was raspy, like he hadn't used it in days. "I thought you wouldn't come. I thought you forgot about me." "I never forget," I said. He let out a shaky breath. He leaned forward and the chains on his wrists clattered against the table. "Get me out of here, Dad." He said it with such intensity, with such desperation that spittle flew from his lips. You have to get me out. You don't know what it is like in here. The noise, the smell. I can't sleep. I can't eat. The food is slop. The other inmates, they look at me like I am prey. I am scared, Dad. I am terrified. I looked at him. I looked at the fear that had replaced the arrogance. You pleaded guilty. Dante, I said, you signed the plea deal. 5 years. You have 4 years and 9 months left. There is nothing I can do. No, Dante hissed, slamming his cuffed hands on the table. A guard stepped forward, but I waved him off. You have money. You have lawyers. Call Saul. Tell him to file an appeal. Tell him I was coerced. Tell him I was insane. Spend the money, Dad. Why are you hoarding it? Use it to save your son. I leaned back in my chair. I am using the money. Dante, I am using it to pay for Leo's tuition. I am using it to fix the roof on the factory. I am using it to pay the salaries of the people you wanted to fire. Dante's face twisted into a sneer. The old Dante, the entitled Dante, bubbled up from beneath the fear. So you are punishing me, he spat. That is what this is, right? You are enjoying this. You are sitting there in your comfortable clothes, smelling like soap, and you are laughing at me. You are cruel old man. You are a heartless, cruel bastard. I didn't blink. I didn't raise my voice. Cruel, I asked, testing the word. You think I am cruel because I let you face the consequences of your actions? Yes, Dante yelled. You could have stopped this. You could have just said no. You didn't have to call the police. You didn't have to show them the video. You chose to ruin me. I leaned forward. I looked deep into his eyes. Let me tell you what cruel is, Dante. Cruel is working a 12-hour shift in August heat, laying bricks until your hands bleed just to buy your son a bicycle, and then watching that son throw the bicycle in the trash because it wasn't the right color. Cruel is trusting your son with your mortgage payments and finding out he gambled the money away, leaving his parents on the verge of homelessness. Cruel is watching your son stand by while his wife drugs his father. Cruel is planning to erase your mother's memory from the house she built. I paused, letting the words sink in. I am not cruel, Dante. I am just a teacher. And I am failing. Failing, Dante asked, confused. Yes, I said. I failed you. I gave you too much too soon. I sheltered you from the rain so you never learned how to build a roof. I gave you the fruit, but I never taught you how to plant the tree. And because I didn't teach you, the world has to teach you now. I pointed at the concrete walls around us. This is your classroom, son. And the lesson is simple. You think assets are a right? You think a trust fund is a birthright? No. I held up my hands. My palms were calloused rough like sandpaper. This is where money comes from, Dante. It comes from sweat. It comes from waking up when you want to sleep. It comes from doing the hard thing when the easy thing is right there. You wanted to sit in the shade and eat from the golden bowl without planting the seed. You wanted the kingdom without fighting the dragon. Well, I said, gesturing to his orange jumpsuit, you tried to take the shortcut, and the shortcut led here. Now you eat prison food because you were too good to work for your own bread. Dante stared at me. The anger drained out of him, leaving only misery. He slumped in his chair. I just wanted what was mine, he whispered. Nothing is yours until you earn it, I said. We sat in silence for a minute. The buzz of the prison filled the air. Where is Tiffany? He asked suddenly. I had been waiting for this question. Why hasn't she visited? Dante asked. I wrote to her. I put her on my list. Why isn't she here? Is she in the women's unit? Is she okay? I let out a short, dry laugh. Tiffany is not in prison. Dante's head snapped up. What? But she did it. She crushed the pills. She was the one who... She cut a deal, I said. Dante's mouth fell open. The day after you were arrested, Tiffany filed for divorce, I told him. She went to the district attorney and she offered to testify against you in exchange for leniency. She painted a picture, Dante. She told them you were the mastermind. She told them you forced her. She played the battered wife card, and she played it perfectly. No, Dante whispered. No, she loves me. We were partners. Partners. I shook my head. You were Mark's Dante. She was using you just like she was using me. And when the ship started sinking, she threw you overboard to use your body as a raft." "Where is she?" Dante asked, his voice trembling. "She got 3 years probation," I said, "and 500 hours of community service. Last I heard, she is picking up trash on the side of Interstate 85 wearing a neon vest. She is living in a motel in Decatur. She isn't coming, Dante. She doesn't need you anymore because you don't have the money." Dante put his head in his hands. His shoulders shook. The final illusion of his life had been shattered. He wasn't a victim. He wasn't a partner. He was a fool who had been played by everyone, including his wife. "She left me," he sobbed. "She took everything and she left me." I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. "She didn't take everything," I said. Dante looked up through his tears. "What is left? I have nothing." "You have time," I said. "You have 5 years, Dante. 5 years to sit in this box and think. 5 years to strip away the greed, the entitlement, and the lies. 5 years to find out if there is a man underneath that orange suit or just a shadow." I turned to go. "Dad, wait," Dante called out. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. "Will you come back?" I looked at the guard waiting by the door. "I will come back when I have a reason to," I said. "What reason?" Dante asked. "When you stop blaming me and start blaming yourself," I said. "That is when the rehabilitation starts. Until then, I am just visiting a stranger." I walked out of the room. I heard him calling my name, but I kept walking. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind me, cutting off his voice. Clang. I walked back through the scanners. I put my belt back on. I walked out into the sunlight. The air smelled sweet. It smelled of pine trees and gasoline and freedom. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs until they burned. I got into my truck. I checked my phone. There was a text from the nanny I had hired to help with Leo. Leo got an A on his math test. He wants to know if we can make pizza tonight. I smiled. I typed back, "Tell him to get the dough ready. I am on my way." I started the engine. I looked at the prison one last time. It was a tomb for the living. But sometimes you have to die to be reborn. I hoped for Dante's sake that he would find a way to resurrect himself in there. But that was his job, not mine. I put the truck in gear and drove away. I didn't look back. I had a pizza to make. And I had a grandson who needed to learn the value of kneading the dough before you bake the bread. They say that a house has a memory and that the walls absorb the energy of the people living inside them. If that is true, then the mansion in Atlanta was screaming. Every time I walked down that marble hallway, I could hear the echoes of Dante's lies and the shrill pitch of Tiffany's greed. I could see the ghost of my son crawling on the floor begging for money, and I could smell the perfume of the woman who tried to poison me. It was a beautiful house on the outside, but inside it was a tomb where my family had died. I lived there for 2 weeks after the arrest, just me and Leo. Every night I watched my grandson wander through those empty rooms looking lost. He would sit on the expensive Italian sofa and his feet would not touch the floor. He looked small and he looked lonely. That house was built for showing off to strangers, not for a family that needed to heal. It was cold stone and echo. So, on a Tuesday morning while Leo was at school, I did something that made my accountant cry. I called a realtor. Not the slick one Dante had hired, but a local woman I knew from church. "Sell it," I told her. She looked at me like I was crazy and said, "Gus, the market is soft, and if you wait a year, you could get another million." I told her I did not want a million, I wanted out. I told her to put a sign in the yard and sell it to the first person who wrote a check, because I did not care if they turned it into a parking lot. I just wanted the weight of it off my back. It sold in 3 days. I took the check, and I did not even look at the number of zeros. I drove 20 miles north, away from the city, away from the noise, and away from the memories. I found a place that looked like the home I grew up in. It was not a mansion. It was a farmhouse with a wraparound porch that needed painting and 10 acres of land that had gone wild. It had an old barn that leaned a little to the left, but it had good bones. When the realtor showed it to me, she apologized and said she knew it was a step down and that it needed a lot of work. I walked onto the porch and kicked one of the loose boards, finding solid oak underneath the peeling paint. I looked at the field where the weeds were waist high and I smelled the dirt. It smelled like work. It smelled like life. I told her I would take it. Moving day was quiet because we did not have a truck full of designer furniture since I sold all of that too. I wanted a clean slate, so I brought my clothes, my books, Bessie's urn, and Leo's toys. That was it. When we pulled up to the farmhouse, Leo looked out the window and his eyes went wide. He asked if this was it, and I told him it was. I told him it was not as fancy as the other place, and there was no swimming pool or movie theater. Leo opened the door and jumped out, running into the tall grass. He did not look at the house. He looked at a butterfly. He picked up a stick and started swinging it like a sword. I watched him, and for the first time in months I saw him act like a child. In the mansion, he was always careful not to break anything, but here he could run and scream and be free. The first few weeks were hard, not because of the physical labor, but because of the silence. Leo missed his parents. He did not ask about them often, but I could hear him crying sometimes at night. I did not try to stop him because you have to let the poison out before the wound can heal. I would just sit outside his door and wait until he fell asleep, then I would go in and tuck the blanket around him. We started a routine. I woke him up at 6, not with a shout, but with the smell of bacon. We ate breakfast together on the porch, watching the sun come up over the pine trees, and then we went to work. I did not hire a landscaper. I hired Leo. I bought him a pair of work gloves that were too big for his hands and a small shovel. I told him we were going to plant a garden. Leo wiped sweat from his forehead and asked why we had to grow food when we could just buy it at the store. I told him that food you grow tastes better because it tastes like victory. We spent days clearing the weeds. My back ached and my knees popped, but I felt stronger than I had in years. Leo worked right beside me, complaining at first that it was hot and his hands hurt. I told him that was good, because calluses are trophies that prove you did something real. We planted tomatoes, peppers, onions, and collard greens, the ingredients of my life. One afternoon, while we were tying up the tomato plants, Leo looked at me and asked why his dad hated work. He said his dad always said work was for suckers, and that smart people get other people to work for them. I stopped tying the string and looked at the boy. He was soaking up everything around him like a sponge. I told him carefully that his dad was confused. I told him that Dante thought the prize was the money, but the prize is actually the work. I explained that when you build something yourself, nobody can take it away from you. If you buy a house, someone can foreclose on it, but if you build it brick by brick, it is yours forever. Leo thought about that and said he did not think he wanted to be a businessman anymore, but that he wanted to be a farmer. I smiled and told him he could be both, because that is the secret. That night, I decided it was time for the next lesson, which was the most important one. I took him into the kitchen. It was a small kitchen with yellow linoleum floors and a stove that rattled when you turned it on, but it had soul. I went to the pantry and pulled out a heavy iron pot, the same pot my father had used. I told him to wash his hands twice because we were making the gold. Leo's eyes lit up and he asked if we were making the sauce. I lined up the ingredients on the counter: vinegar, molasses, brown sugar, mustard seed, cayenne, and 3 jars of spices that had no labels. I did not write down the recipe for him. Instead, I made him smell it. I held a jar under his nose and told him to close his eyes and guess. He guessed cumin, but I told him to smell deeper because it was smoked paprika from Spain, which gives it the heat that hits you 3 seconds after you swallow. We cooked for 4 hours. I taught him how to caramelize the onions until they were sweet as candy. I taught him how to bloom the spices in hot oil to wake them up. I taught him that you have to stir the pot in a figure-8 motion so it doesn't burn on the bottom. He stood on a stool stirring with a wooden spoon that was older than he was. The steam curled around his face, making his hair frizzy, and he looked so much like my father in that moment, it took my breath away. He asked if it was done trying to dip his finger in, but I told him patience, because you cannot rush flavor. It has to marry. The vinegar has to make friends with the sugar. When it was finally ready, we dipped a piece of bread in the pot and ate it standing up in the kitchen. Leo closed his eyes and said it tasted warm. I told him that was the secret ingredient. It is not the spices, it is the warmth and the love you put into the stirring. If you cook with anger, it tastes bitter, but if you cook with love, it tastes like home. We bottled the sauce in mason jars and put a label on the first one written in crayon that said Leo's Gold. He put it on the shelf like it was a gold medal. A week later, the check from the house sale cleared. It was a lot of money. More money than I needed for the rest of my life. I sat at the kitchen table looking at the bank statement, thinking about Dante and how this money had destroyed him. I did not want it sitting there gathering dust, because money that sits still rots. I called Saul and told him to come over for dinner and to bring his notepad. Saul came and ate 3 helpings of collard greens, praising Leo's sauce until the boy was beaming. After dinner, while Leo was catching fireflies in the yard, Saul and I sat on the porch. He asked what the plan was because I had a small fortune sitting in cash and the tax man would be hungry. I told him I did not want to keep it. I told him I wanted to expand the Bessie Miller Scholarship. Right now we sent 2 kids to trade school a year, but I wanted to send 50. Saul whistled and said that was a legacy. I watched Leo running in the yard, his laughter floating on the evening breeze. I told Saul I wanted to find the kids like me, the kids who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty, the kids who want to be plumbers and electricians and welders because the world has enough middle managers, but we need more builders. I added that I wanted to name a special grant after Leo, the Leo Miller Grant for agricultural science for kids who want to farm. Saul wrote it down and told me I was a good man and that Bessie would be proud. I looked up at the stars and missed her every day, but here in this quiet place I felt her closer than I ever did in the mansion. Saul left around 9 and I sat on the porch swing rocking back and forth. The crickets were singing their night song when the screen door creaked open and Leo walked out. He was wearing his pajamas and holding a half-empty jar of fireflies. I asked if he couldn't sleep. He climbed onto the swing next to me and leaned his head against my shoulder. He was getting heavy and growing fast. He asked me if we had to go back. I asked him back where. He said back to the big house or to the city when his mom and dad got out. I put my arm around him and told him no. I told him we sold that house and it was gone. He was quiet for a long time and I thought he had fallen asleep until he whispered, "Good." I asked him why that was good since the other house had a pool and a game room. He looked up at me with his eyes reflecting the moonlight and said he liked it here better because that house was cold and I was always far away in my office or the guest room. He snuggled deeper into my side and said that here the walls are close and he gets to be near me. He said here I teach him stuff and nobody yells. I felt a tear run down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, it was a tear of pure gratitude. That was it. That was the payoff. Not the millions of dollars or the legal victory or the satisfaction of seeing Dante punished. It was this. A boy on a porch swing telling me he felt safe. I kissed the top of his head and told him we were staying right here. I told him we were going to grow the biggest tomatoes in Georgia and make a lot of sauce. He asked sleepily if we would make money too. I laughed softly and said, yeah, we would make some money too, but we were going to use it to help people and build ladders for them to climb up. Leo didn't answer because he was asleep. I sat there for a long time holding my grandson looking out at the dark fields. I saw the future, and it wasn't paved with gold. It was paved with good, honest dirt. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't worried about what tomorrow would bring, because whatever it brought, we would handle it together with our hands. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind in the trees, and it sounded like Bessie whispering that I did good. 5 years is a long time in the life of a tomato plant, but it is a blink of an eye in the life of a man. Time moves differently when you are watching things grow. When I was living in the mansion fighting with Dante and Tiffany, time felt like a heavy chain wrapped around my chest. But here on the farm, time flows like water in a creek. It is clear, it is cool, and it moves in only one direction forward. I sat on my rocking chair on the porch. The wood was worn smooth by my elbows. The sun was dipping low over the Georgia pines, painting the sky in shades of purple and burnt orange. I held a glass of sweet tea in my hand, the condensation dripping onto my fingers. My hands were older now. The veins were more prominent and the knuckles were a little more swollen. But they were still strong. They were hands that had pulled weeds this morning. They were hands that had fixed the tractor yesterday. I looked out across the yard. It was not a manicured lawn anymore. It was a bustling headquarters of hope. We had set up folding tables on the grass near the barn. About 20 people were sitting there. There were local farmers. There were teachers. There was Saul, who looked even older but still wore his tweed suit despite the heat. And standing at the front of the tables holding a clipboard was a young man. He was 13 years old now. He had shot up like a beanstalk. His shoulders were getting broad and his voice had that funny crack in it that happens when a boy is trying to become a man. He was wearing a clean button-down shirt tucked into jeans and a pair of work boots that were covered in dust. Leo. He was leading the quarterly meeting of the Bessie Miller Scholarship Fund. I listened to him speak. He did not sound like the scared little boy who used to hide behind my leg. He sounded confident. He sounded kind. We have 3 new applicants for the trade school grant, Leo was saying. He looked at his notes. 1 wants to be a welder, 1 wants to study solar panel installation, and 1 wants to be a chef. I think we should approve all 3. The chef reminds me of Grandpa. He says food is a language. The group nodded. They listened to him not because he was cute, but because he made sense. He had authority. not the kind of authority Dante had tried to buy with fancy suits and loud shouting. Leo had the authority of someone who listens. I took a sip of tea. A feeling of warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the summer heat. The meeting broke up a few minutes later. People started shaking hands and walking toward their cars. Saul walked up to the porch. He took a seat on the swing next to me. He groaned a little as he sat down. "My hip hates this humidity," Saul complained. "It is good for the corn," I said. Saul chuckled. "Always the farmer, Gus." He watched Leo shaking hands with a woman from the local college. "He is a natural," Saul said. "He runs a meeting better than most CEOs I know, and he actually reads the applications." I nodded. "He cares, Saul. That is the difference. You can teach a man to read a balance sheet, but you cannot teach him to care about the people behind the numbers." Saul went quiet. He pulled a folded newspaper out of his jacket pocket. He held it for a moment, tapping it against his knee. "I have news, Gus," he said softly. I knew what was coming. I had the date marked on my calendar in the kitchen. I hadn't looked at it, but I knew it was today. "He is out?" I asked. Saul nodded. "Released this morning. Good behavior. Overcrowding. The usual story." I looked at the condensation on my glass. "Did he call?" I asked. "No," Saul said. "The restraining order is still in place. He knows he can't come within 10 miles of you or the boy, and the trust locks him out of any financial access. He is on his own, Gus." I looked out at the tree line. "Where did he go?" Saul sighed. "He is in downtown Atlanta. He got a job, Gus. It was part of his parole requirement. He has to maintain employment to stay out of a halfway house." "Doing what?" Saul hesitated. He looked at me sideways, gauging my reaction. "He is at Tony's Diner on 4th Street. He is in the back. Washing dishes," I whispered. Saul nodded. "Washing dishes. Minimum wage. No tips." I closed my eyes. Tony's Diner. That was where I got my first job when I was 20 years old. I washed dishes there for 2 years before I saved enough money to buy my first trowel and start laying bricks. It was hot, wet, miserable work. Your hands got pruny and cracked. Your back screamed from bending over the sink. You went home smelling like old grease and wet garbage. "It is poetry," Saul said quietly. "A cruel kind of poetry." "No, Saul," I said, opening my eyes. "It is not cruel. It is necessary." I thought about Dante, my son, the boy who thought he was too good to work, the man who wanted to fire my factory workers because he viewed them as overhead. Now he was the overhead. Now he was the one standing in the steam, scraping half-eaten food off plates. "He is finally learning," I said. Learning what Saul asked. "He is learning that a clean plate doesn't happen by magic," I said. "He is learning that someone has to do the work." For 40 years he thought the world owed him a living. Now he knows the world only owes him what he earns with his 2 hands. I took a sip of tea. "Is he angry?" I asked. Saul shrugged. "Probably, but he is showing up. His parole officer says he hasn't missed a shift in 3 days. I nodded. "Good. Let him scrub. Let him sweat. Maybe the grease will wash away the entitlement. Maybe when he looks at a dollar bill now, he won't see a toy. He will see an hour of his life. That is the only way he will ever be a man." Saul put a hand on my shoulder. "You are a hard man, Gus." I looked at Leo, who was waving goodbye to the last car. "I am a father, Saul. And sometimes being a father means letting your child fall so they can learn how to stand up. I carried him for too long. Now he has to walk." Leo jogged up the steps. He was flushed and smiling. "Did you hear me, Grandpa?" he asked. I approved the chef. "I heard you, astronaut," I said. "You did good." Leo sat down on the railing. He looked at Saul. "Hi, Mr. Saul. Did you tell Grandpa the news?" Saul smiled. "What news?" Leo grinned. "The tomatoes, the big beefsteaks in the south field. They are ready. Me and Grandpa are going to harvest them tomorrow. We are going to make a special batch of sauce. The spicy kind." I looked at my grandson. He didn't ask about the stock market. He didn't ask about inheritance. He didn't ask about video games. He was excited about tomatoes. He had dirt under his fingernails. He had a smudge of grease on his cheek. And he was the happiest I had ever seen him. "We are going to make a lot of sauce, Leo," I said. Leo looked at the sunset. "Grandpa?" he said quietly. "Yeah, son. Do you think my dad would like the sauce?" The question hung in the air. 5 years, and he still thought about him. Of course he did. Blood is a river that flows deep even when it is dammed up. I looked at Saul. Saul looked away. I set my glass down. "I think your dad is learning to appreciate a good meal, Leo," I said. "Maybe one day when he has scrubbed enough plates to understand what goes on to them, he will be ready to taste it. But not yet." Leo nodded. He seemed to understand. "Not yet," he repeated. He jumped off the railing. "I am going to check the chickens," he said. "I think the red hen is hiding eggs again." He ran off toward the barn, his boots thumping against the ground. I watched him go. I watched the future running across the grass. I didn't leave him a trust fund full of cash that he could spend on sports cars. I didn't leave him a mansion that would isolate him from the world. I left him something better. I left him a work ethic. I left him the knowledge that if you put a seed in the ground and water it and protect it from pests, it will feed you. I left him the ability to look a man in the eye and shake his hand with a grip that means something. Dante was washing dishes in a diner. Tiffany was working at a laundromat in another state trying to outrun her reputation. They were living the lives they had earned. And me, I was sitting on a porch in a house that needed painting, drinking tea with my friend, watching my grandson grow into a good man. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of damp earth and pine needles. It smelled of peace. I looked at the empty chair next to me. I imagined Bessie sitting there. "We made it, Bessie," I whispered. It was a crooked road and we lost a few wheels along the way, but we got the wagon home. I picked up my tea and toasted the sunset. $1 a year, I said to the wind. Best job in the world. Many people spend their lives building castles thinking that leaving a fortune to their children is the ultimate act of love. But I learned the hard way that inheritance without character is not a blessing, it is a curse. It turns children into vultures and parents into prey. True legacy isn't about the zeros in a bank account or the square footage of a mansion. It is about the sweat on your brow, the integrity in your handshake, and the courage to cut off the rotten branches so the tree can survive. I didn't save my son, but I saved my grandson, and in doing so, I saved myself. If you enjoyed this story about Gus and his fight for his legacy, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments below, would you have forgiven Dante, or did Gus make the right choice by letting him hit rock bottom? I read every single comment. See you in the next story.